Happy anniversary, darling. Try not to scream, or I will have the rest of him sent to you in pieces. My heart stopped not out of love, but out of a cold, paralyzing terror that felt like ice water flooding my veins. My husband just handed me a severed finger inside a Tiffany blue box because he needs access to my $500 million trust fund by midnight. I forced a smile that felt like cracking porcelain. Let the game begin. The crystal flute in my hand trembled ever so slightly against the rim of my lips. Around me the air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the low hum of gossip that always permeated these Upper East Side charity galas. Everyone was watching. They were all vultures waiting for a carcass to pick apart. Marcus stood before me looking every inch the devoted husband in his bespoke Italian suit, his hand resting possessively on the small of my back. To the cameras flashing in the distance, he was the picture of affection. To me, he was a monster whose fingers were digging into my flesh hard enough to leave bruises beneath the silk of my dress. The box sat on the high cocktail table between us, innocent and wrapped in a white satin ribbon. It looked like a jewelry gift, a token of apology for his gambling debts, perhaps, or maybe a peace offering after months of cold silence. But I knew better. The metallic smell of iron managed to cut through the aroma of fresh roses and champagne. "Open it, Elena," Marcus whispered, his voice a velvety purr that made my skin crawl. "Do it for the cameras. They are dying to see how much I love you." I reached out my fingers, brushing against the cool cardboard. The lid lifted with a soft friction that sounded like a scream in my ears. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, was not a diamond necklace. It was a finger. A human finger. Pale and bloodless. On it sat the heavy gold signet ring engraved with the Vane family crest. My brother Leo's ring. The room spun. The chatter of the socialites faded into a dull roar like being underwater. Bile rose in my throat, burning and acidic. I wanted to vomit. I wanted to scream until my lungs burst. I wanted to grab the steak knife from the table and plunge it into Marcus's carotid artery, but I did none of those things. I simply stared. "Do you recognize the ring?" Marcus leaned in closer, his breath smelling of scotch and mint. "Leo was so brave. He barely cried out when we took it. But the next piece will be his ear, and then his eyes. Unless you sign the transfer papers tonight." My vision blurred, but I blinked the tears back. Crying was a luxury I could not afford. Not now. Not when Leo was bleeding somewhere in a dark warehouse because his sister married a psychopath. I closed the box with a snap. The sound was sharp and final like a gunshot. I looked up at Marcus, meeting his sadistic gaze. "You are desperate, Marcus," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that only he could hear. "You must be in deeper debt with the cartel than I thought if you have resorted to physical mutilation." His smile faltered for a fraction of a second, replaced by a flash of raw fear before the mask of arrogance slammed back into place. "You have 1 hour to leave this party and meet me at the lawyer's office. If you try to call the police, Leo dies. If you try to run, Leo dies. If you look at me the wrong way, Leo dies. Do we understand each other?" Before I could answer, the crowd parted. The sound of stilettos clicking aggressively against the marble floor signaled the arrival of the second act in this grotesque play. Chloe, his secretary, his mistress, the woman who helped him plan this. She was wearing a red dress that was cut too low and too tight, a deliberate mockery of my conservative white gown. She walked straight towards us, holding a glass of red wine like a weapon. "Oh, Elena!" Chloe exclaimed, her voice shrill and fake. "I am so clumsy." Before I could sidestep, she lunged forward. The dark crimson liquid splashed across the front of my white dress, spreading like a fresh gunshot wound. The symbolism was not lost on me. It looked like blood. Leo's blood. The crowd gasped, followed by a ripple of suppressed laughter. To them, this was just another episode of the Sterling family drama. The poor heiress being humiliated by her husband's lover. They had no idea that the stain on my dress was the least of my worries. Chloe covered her mouth in mock horror, but her eyes were dancing with malicious delight. "Oh dear. It looks like you are bleeding. Maybe you should go home and change. Or just leave forever. You really do not belong here anymore." The humiliation burned hotter than the wine soaking into my skin. I stood there alone in a room full of people who supposedly called themselves my friends. Not one of them stepped forward. They sipped their drinks and watched, enjoying the spectacle of the fallen Vane princess. I felt naked, exposed. A sudden wave of dizziness hit me. This was their plan. Break me publicly, isolate me, make me feel so small and powerless that I would sign away my fortune just to make the pain stop. Marcus chuckled a low, dark sound. "Look at you. A mess. Just like your brother. He is probably making a mess on the floor right now, too." Something inside me snapped. It was not a loud snap. It was the quiet, terrifying click of a safety catch being disengaged. The fear that had paralyzed me moments ago evaporated, replaced by a cold, clinical rage. My father had not raised a victim. He had raised a shark. I had spent years playing the role of the dutiful, oblivious wife, hiding my claws to protect my family's legacy. But the moment they touched Leo, they broke the only rule that mattered. I looked at the wine stain on my chest. Then I looked at the cake knife lying on the silver platter next to the untouched anniversary cake. It was a long serrated blade with a pearl handle. Heavy. Sharp. I reached out and picked up the knife. The movement was so fluid and calm that Marcus did not react until the blade was an inch from his groin. His eyes went wide. The laughter in the room died instantly. Silence descended heavy and suffocating. I did not stab him. Instead, I turned and slammed the knife down into the multi-tiered cake with a force that shook the table. Cream and sponge flew into the air. I dragged the blade through the dessert, destroying the perfect white frosting slicing through the sugar flowers. It was a violent, jagged cut. "I will sign," I said, my voice echoing in the silent hall. "But not because I am afraid of you, Marcus." I pulled the knife out and wiped the frosting onto the tablecloth, staring him dead in the eyes. "I will sign because I want you to feel like you have won. For now." I leaned in close, the knife still in my hand, the tip hovering dangerously close to his expensive Italian belt. "But remember this. When you take a piece of a vein, you better be prepared to pay for the whole thing, and the price is higher than you can count." Marcus took a step back, his face draining of color. For a moment he saw it, the darkness beneath my polished exterior. But his greed was stronger than his survival instinct. He scoffed, trying to regain his composure. "1 hour, Elena, or the next box will need to be a coffin." He grabbed Chloe's arm and dragged her away, leaving me standing amidst the ruin of the cake and the whispers of the elite. I did not run. I did not cry. I picked up the Tiffany box and placed it calmly into my clutch. I walked out of the ballroom with my head held high, ignoring the stares and the cameras flashing like lightning storms. The valet brought my car around, a black armored sedan that I had purchased secretly 3 months ago. I slid into the back seat, the heavy door thudding shut and sealing out the noise of the city. The silence of the car was a sanctuary. My hands finally started to shake. I pulled out my secure satellite phone, the one Marcus did not know existed. I dialed a number that I had memorized but never hoped to use. 1 ring, 2 rings. Click! A deep, distorted voice answered on the other end. "Protocol clean sweep is unauthorized. Identify." "It is me," I said, my voice cracking slightly before hardening into steel. "They have Leo. They took a finger. I have 24 hours before they kill him. I need you to find him, Damon. I need you to burn their world down. And Damon..." I paused, looking down at the wine stain on my dress. "Do not kill Marcus yet. Leave him for me." There was a pause on the line, followed by the sound of a weapon being racked. Understood, Mrs. Sterling. The hunt begins now. I hung up and looked out the window at the New York skyline glittering in the darkness. The city looked beautiful, like a jewel box. But inside the box there was rot. Marcus thought he had won. He thought he had broken me. He had no idea that he had just released the only thing that could destroy him. I touched the cold surface of the Tiffany box in my bag. Hold on, Leo. Big sister is coming, and I am bringing hell with me. The elevator doors to the penthouse slid open with a soft chime that sounded like the bell, signaling the start of a boxing match. The air inside was stiflingly warm and smelled of expensive leather and the sickeningly sweet aroma of Chloe's cheap perfume, which seemed to have already colonized my home. Marcus walked in first, loosening his tie with a jagged motion that betrayed his manic energy. He went straight to the bar. The clinking of crystal against crystal rang out sharply in the silence as he poured himself a drink with a hand that was shaking not from fear, but from an adrenaline high. He thought he had won. He thought the game was over. I stepped onto the marble floor, feeling the cold hardness seep through the soles of my shoes, grounding me. "You have 45 minutes, Elena," Marcus said without turning around the liquid in his glass swirling violently. "My lawyer is on his way with the transfer documents. Do not get comfortable. You will be signing them on the kitchen island, and then you will be packing a bag. A small bag." I stood still. My clutch held tightly against my side, the weight of the Tiffany box inside pressing against my ribs like a second heart. The silence in the apartment was heavy, broken only by the sound of Marcus gulping down his scotch. He was celebrating before the ink was even dry. It was the mistake of an amateur. A true predator waits until the prey is dead before feasting. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the hallway leading to the master bedroom. It was the sound of something fragile shattering against the wall. A vase. My favorite porcelain vase from the Ming Dynasty. My stomach tightened, but I kept my face impassive. Chloe's voice drifted out shrill and excited like a child in a candy store she had just broken into. "Oh, Marcus, look at this. She has so many things. Do we really have to let her take a bag? Can I just keep it all?" I walked towards the bedroom, my heels clicking a steady rhythmic cadence on the floor. Click, click, click. It was not just walking. It was a signal. The microphone embedded in the pearl earring I wore was picking up the frequency, transmitting the tempo to Damon's team. I was telling them I was inside. I was telling them the location was compromised. I pushed the bedroom door open. The sight that greeted me was a scene of violation. My closet doors were thrown wide open. Silk dresses were pulled from their hangers and tossed onto the floor in a heap of fabric. Chloe was standing in the middle of the room holding one of my limited edition handbags, her fingers digging into the delicate leather with greasy disregard. "Get your hands off my property." I said, my voice low and dangerous. Chloe jumped slightly, but then she remembered who held the power. She sneered, tossing the bag onto the pile of clothes. It landed with a soft thud. "It is not yours anymore, honey. It is community property. And since you are about to sign away your rights, I am just helping you sort through what is trash." She stepped forward, invading my personal space. "You know Marcus promised me I could redecorate. I am thinking of burning all this. It smells like old money and sadness." She reached out and flicked the strap of my dress, her nails scratching against my skin. A sharp, stinging sensation that made my muscles tense. I wanted to break her wrist. I knew exactly how to do it. A simple twist and apply pressure to the joint. But I could not. Not yet. Leo was still missing. I had to play the victim. I had to feed their ego until they choked on it. I took a step back, feigning fear, my breath hitching in a calculated display of panic. "Please, just let me pack. I will sign the papers. Just do not hurt him." Marcus appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame with a smirk that made him look like a hyena. "Look at her, Chloe. The Ice Queen is melting. He walked over and kicked a pile of my silk scarves, scattering them across the room. You have 10 minutes to pack. And Elena, if you try to stash any jewelry, I will know. Chloe is going to supervise you. Every single second. He turned and walked back towards the living room, whistling a cheerful tune that clashed violently with the atmosphere of coercion. I moved to the dresser, my movements stiff and jerky. Chloe sat on the edge of the bed, swinging her legs, watching me with predatory eyes. I opened the drawer and pulled out a simple cashmere sweater. My hands were trembling, but I forced them to continue the charade. I needed to plant the device. I needed to get the tracker on her. I looked at the pile of discarded bags on the floor. There was one specific bag, a crocodile skin Hermes. It was gaudy. It was loud. It was exactly Chloe's taste. And hidden inside the lining was a high-frequency listening device and a GPS tracker I had sewn in months ago for a different purpose. I picked up the bag, holding it like it was a peace offering. You know, I said, my voice trembling slightly. You are right, Chloe. I do not need this one. It is too bold for me. I prefer something quieter, but it would look stunning with your dress. Chloe's eyes widened. Greed was a powerful drug, and she was an addict. She hopped off the bed and snatched the bag from my hands. Really? You are giving this to me? She ran her hands over the textured skin, completely oblivious to the technology hidden beneath her fingertips. Consider it a parting gift, I said, turning back to the drawer to hide the cold smile that was threatening to form on my lips. I just want this to be over. I want my brother back. Chloe slung the bag over her shoulder, posing in front of the mirror, admiring herself. She looked ridiculous, but I kept my opinion to myself. The device was active. Now, wherever she went, Damon would know. Whatever Marcus discussed with her, Damon would hear. The intercom buzzed loud and jarring. Mr. Sterling, the lawyer is here, Marcus shouted from the other room, his voice booming with authority. Bring her out, Chloe, time to sign. Chloe grabbed my arm, her fingers digging into my bicep with unnecessary force. Move it, princess. Show time. She dragged me out of the bedroom, leaving the mess of my life scattered on the floor behind us. We walked into the living room. A man in a gray suit was arranging documents on the marble kitchen island. He did not look at me. He was one of Marcus's cronies, a lawyer who had sold his ethics for a retainer fee long ago. The papers were spread out like a fan, white sheets covered in dense legal text that boiled down to one sentence: I give up everything. Marcus held out a gold pen. Sign here, here, and here, and then I will make the call to release Leo. I took the pen. The metal was cold against my skin. I looked at the papers. Then I looked at Marcus. There was a hunger in his eyes that was almost feral. He was vibrating with anticipation. I leaned over the table, the tip of the pen hovering over the signature line. I hesitated. What is the matter? Marcus hissed, his patience snapping like a dry twig. Sign it, or do I need to send for another box? I am reading the clause, I said, slowly, stalling for time. I tapped my heel against the floor again. 1, 2, 3. A confirmation signal. I needed to know Damon was in position before I signed. If I signed too early, Marcus might kill Leo anyway to tie up loose ends. You do not read? You sign? Marcus slammed his hand down on the table, making the papers jump. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the large room. Chloe giggled nervously from the corner, clutching her new stolen bag. I looked at the clock on the wall. The second hand was ticking loudly. Tick, tick, tick. Each second was a drop of blood. Suddenly, my phone, which was sitting on the counter, buzzed once. A single short vibration. It was the signal. Damon had located the target. The hunt was on. I looked at Marcus and let out a long, shaky breath. Okay, I will sign. I pressed the pen to the paper and scribbled my name. The ink flowed dark and permanent. With each stroke, I was legally stripping myself of my fortune. But illegality was a game I was about to play much better than them. I finished the last signature and straightened up, dropping the pen onto the document. It is done. Marcus snatched the papers up, scanning them frantically. A wide manic grin split his face. He laughed a sound that was ugly and triumphant. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. It is done. Keep the boy for another hour just to be safe, then dump him at the nearest hospital. He hung up and looked at me, his eyes gleaming with malice. See, Elena? Was that so hard? Now get out of my house. You have 5 minutes before I call security to throw you out. I nodded, my face a mask of defeat. I turned to leave, clutching my small bag of clothes. As I walked past Chloe, she smirked and patted the crocodile bag on her shoulder. Thanks for the donation. I walked to the elevator, the doors opening to swallow me whole. As the doors closed, cutting off the sight of Marcus celebrating with a fresh bottle of champagne, I finally allowed myself to exhale. I looked at my reflection in the polished metal of the elevator doors. My eyes were not the eyes of a victim. They were the eyes of an executioner. The tracker was live. The lawyer had the papers, but the transfer would take 24 hours to clear the bank. And in 24 hours, Marcus Sterling would wish he had never learned how to write his own name. The elevator descended rapidly, the sensation of falling matching the descent into the hell I was about to unleash. I pulled out my phone and typed a single message to Damon. Target acquired. The bag is in play. Do not miss. The rain had started to fall, drumming a relentless rhythm against the reinforced glass of the armored sedan. It sounded like thousands of tiny fingers tapping, demanding to be let in. I sat in the back seat, enveloped in darkness, save for the ghostly blue glow of the surveillance laptop resting on my knees. My driver, a silent man named Arthur, kept his eyes on the road, navigating the slick streets of New York with the precision of a machine. But my mind was not on the road. It was miles away in a derelict industrial park in New Jersey. I adjusted the earpiece in my right ear, pressing it deeper until the seal was tight, blocking out the hum of the city. Status. I whispered, my voice barely audible over the rain. The static in my ear cleared, replaced by the sound of heavy, controlled breathing and the crunch of gravel under tactical boots. We are at the perimeter, Mrs. Sterling. Damon's voice was a low growl devoid of fear. Thermal imaging confirms 4 heat signatures inside the main structure. 1 stationary target in the basement. That must be the package. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. The package. Leo. Just a boy who liked playing the violin and reading comic books, now reduced to a tactical objective. Proceed. I said, my hand gripping the leather armrest so hard my knuckles turned white. Use extreme prejudice, Damon. Anyone holding a weapon is a target. Copy that. Going dark. For a moment there was only silence, the kind of silence that stretches and warps time. I closed my eyes, visualizing the warehouse based on the schematics on my screen. Then the sounds began. It was not like the movies. There was no dramatic music, no shouting. Just the sickening, wet thud of a body hitting the floor, followed by a sharp, gurgling gasp that was cut short. Tango 1 down, Damon whispered, moving to the breach point. A loud metallic clang echoed through the feed, causing me to flinch. Someone had kicked a door open. The silence shattered. Shouts erupted in Spanish, rough and panicked. The distinct fut-fut-fut of suppressed gunfire cut through the yelling. It sounded like a staple gun, aggressive and rhythmic. I heard a body crash into something metal, probably shelving, followed by the sound of glass shattering. Right side clear. Right. A strange voice yelled, followed by a scream that ended in a choke. I sat frozen in the back of the luxury car, my breath caught in my throat. I was listening to men die, men who had hurt my brother. And God help me, I wanted to hear more. I wanted to hear them beg. The violence was a symphony, and I was the conductor from afar. Suddenly my phone buzzed violently in my lap, startling me. The screen lit up with a picture of a smiling Marcus. The devil was calling. I stared at the screen for a second, the vibrations rattling against the laptop. If I did not answer, he might get suspicious. He might call the captors to check on Leo. I had to play the role. I had to be the defeated wife. I took a deep, shaky breath and answered, swiping the green button while keeping the earpiece line open. I was now living in two worlds. In my right ear, death and chaos. In my left ear, arrogance and greed. "Hello, Marcus," I said, forcing my voice to sound hollow and broken. "Elena, darling." Marcus's voice was slurred, rich with the arrogance of a man who thinks he is untouchable. "I just wanted to make sure you left the building. I do not want you lurking in the lobby like a stray dog. It would be embarrassing for the residents." In my right ear, a shotgun blast roared so loud it distorted the audio feed. Boom! I flinched physically but kept my voice steady. "I am in the car, Marcus. I am leaving. Just like you wanted." "Good. Good." I could hear the clink of ice cubes in a glass. He was drinking, celebrating, while his hired thugs were being hunted down. "You know this is for the best. You were never cut out for this world, Elena. You are too soft. You let emotions cloud your judgment. That is why your father left the company in a trust. He knew you would need a man to manage it." Crack! The sound of a bone breaking snapped through the earpiece, followed by a high-pitched whimper of pain from New Jersey. Soft. He called me soft while I listened to his mercenary getting his arm broken by my extraction team. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth. "You are right, Marcus," I said coldly. I was too trusting. I thought marriage meant partnership, not a hostile takeover. "Business is war, Elena. You are just a casualty. Don't take it personally. By the way, make sure you do not cancel the credit cards immediately. I have a few expenses to settle tonight. Champagne is not cheap." The audacity made my blood boil. He was spending my money to celebrate destroying my life. "Hold the line, Marcus," I said. In the earpiece, the gunfire had stopped. The heavy breathing returned. Clear. The room is clear. Moving to the basement. I held my breath. This was it. The moment of truth. I could hear the creak of rusty hinges, footsteps descending metal stairs. Clang, clang, clang. It sounded like a descent into the underworld. Marcus was still talking in my other ear, oblivious. "And maybe send the driver back for the rest of your shoes tomorrow. I do not want your clutter." "Target located." Damon's voice cut through Marcus's babble. "Is he?" I started to ask, but stopped myself, realizing Marcus was still on the line. Marcus paused. "Is who what? Are you talking to someone, Elena?" "No," I lied quickly. "Just talking to myself. It is a long drive." In the earpiece, I heard a low moan. It was a sound of pure agony. Leo. "Oh God." Damon's voice lost its professional edge for a split second. "Boss, you need to see this. Or hear this." "Is he alive, Damon?" I whispered, forgetting Marcus for a second. "Who is Damon?" Marcus demanded, his voice sharpening. "Elena, what are you doing?" I ignored Marcus. "Damon, report." "He is alive," Damon said grimly. "But they nailed him to the chair. Literally. Through the hands." The world tilted on its axis, nailed, like a crucifixion. My vision went black for a second. The cruelty was medieval. It was not just about money, it was about torture. "Elena, who are you talking to?" Marcus shouted. I switched my focus back to the phone. The rage that exploded in my chest was colder than zero. It was a black hole consuming everything. "I am talking to the man who just found my brother Marcus." There was a dead silence on the line. The ice cubes stopped clinking. The arrogance evaporated instantly, leaving only the hollow vacuum of fear. What Marcus whispered, that is impossible." I listened to the sounds from the warehouse, the sound of metal being pried loose, Leo screaming, a raw, tearing sound that shredded my heart. Then Damon's voice, soothing and firm. I got you, kid. I got you. We are going home. He is alive, Marcus. I said, my voice dropping to a terrifyingly calm register. And his hands. Your men nailed his hands to a chair. No. No, that is not. I just told them to scare him. Marcus stammered, his voice rising in panic. I did not tell them to do that. It was the cartel guys. They went too far. It does not matter what you told them, I said. You opened the door. You invited the monsters in, and now the monsters are coming for you. Elena, listen to me. Marcus started to beg. I hung up. I pulled the phone away from my ear and stared at it as if it were a venomous snake. Then I rolled down the window and tossed the phone out into the rain. It bounced on the wet asphalt and disappeared under the wheels of a taxi behind us. Damon. I spoke into the earpiece. Get him to the private clinic. Use the trauma team. Do not go to a hospital. I cannot have a police report yet. Copy that. Damon sounded out of breath. He is in shock but stable. We are moving out. One of the hostiles is still breathing. Do you want us to finish him? No, I said, leaning back against the leather seat, closing my eyes. Patch him up. Bring him to the safe house. I want a witness. I want someone who can testify that Marcus Sterling ordered this. And Damon, go ahead. Make sure he feels every bump in the road on the way there. I pulled the laptop closer, watching the GPS dots move away from the warehouse. The red dots of the enemies were motionless. The blue dot of my brother was moving fast. He was safe. Maimed, but safe. I looked at the driver. Arthur, turn the car around. Arthur looked in the rearview mirror, his eyes wide. Where to, ma'am? The airport? No. I touched the empty spot on the seat beside me where the Tiffany box sat. I smiled a smile that did not reach my eyes. Take me back to the penthouse. I forgot to give my husband his anniversary present. The elevator ascent felt slower this time. The gravity of what I had just heard pulled at my stomach, turning the rising motion into a sickening lurch. Beside me, Arthur stood like a granite statue, his hands clasped in front of him, ready to do violence at a single command. I checked my reflection in the polished steel doors. My hair was still perfect. My white dress was still stained with red wine, but the woman wearing it had changed. The terrified victim who had descended these floors 30 minutes ago was gone. In her place stood someone capable of burning down a city to keep her family warm. We reached the penthouse floor. The doors slid open with a soft hydraulic hiss. The apartment was no longer silent. It sounded like a frantic evacuation zone. I could hear the ripping sound of zippers being forced shut, the crash of drawers being pulled out too far and falling to the floor, and the distinct heavy footsteps of a man pacing in circles. Marcus was running. He knew the game was up, and like all cowards, his first instinct was flight. I stepped into the foyer, my heels sinking into the plush carpet, absorbing the sound of my arrival. I signaled Arthur to stay by the elevator. This confrontation needed to be personal. I walked towards the living room where the chaos was centered. Chloe was standing by the window, clutching the crocodile Hermes bag I had given her, looking confused and frightened. Marcus was stuffing stacks of cash from a wall safe into a duffel bag, his hands shaking so badly he dropped several bundles. They hit the floor with a soft thud. Going somewhere, Marcus? I asked, my voice cutting through the room like a shard of glass. Marcus spun around so fast he nearly lost his balance. His face was pale, slick with sweat, his eyes wide and manic. He looked from me to the open door, expecting to see the police, or perhaps the cartel hitmen he owed money to. When he saw it was just me, his fear morphed instantly into a dangerous, desperate aggression. He spat the word out like poison. You should be running, Elena. You should be halfway to the airport. Do you think knowing about Leo changes anything? It just means I have to accelerate the timeline. He took a step towards me, his hands balling into fists. I did not flinch. I did not step back. I stood my ground watching him with a detached clinical curiosity. It was fascinating to see how quickly the facade of the sophisticated CEO crumbled, revealing the thug underneath. It changes everything, Marcus, I said calmly, picking up a crystal paperweight from the console table. It was heavy in my hand, cool and solid, because now I know you are not a mastermind. You are just a middleman, and middlemen are disposable. Shut up! Marcus roared, lunging forward. He was fast fueled by panic and rage. He raised his hand to strike me, a backhanded blow meant to silence me, to put me back in my place. I did not need to use the paperweight. Before his hand could connect, a shadow detached itself from the hallway. Arthur moved with a speed that defied his size. He caught Marcus's wrist in midair, stopping the blow inches from my face. There was a sickening crunch of cartilage grinding against bone. Marcus screamed, a high-pitched sound of shock and pain, as Arthur twisted his arm behind his back, forcing him to his knees. "Let go of me. Do you know who I am?" Marcus yelled, struggling uselessly against Arthur's iron grip. "You are a man who just lost his only bargaining chip." I walked over to where he was kneeling, looking down at him. The power dynamic had flipped completely. An hour ago, I was the one looking up, begging. Now, I was the judge and the jury. Chloe let out a whimper from the corner, shrinking back against the curtains. I ignored her. My focus was entirely on my husband. I leaned down close enough to smell the sour stench of his fear. "Did you really think I would sign $500 million over to you without insurance? Did you think I was that stupid?" "I have the papers," Marcus spat through gritted teeth, wincing as Arthur applied more pressure to his shoulder. "The lawyer took them. The transfer is happening right now." I laughed, a low, humorless sound. I reached into my clutch and pulled out my phone, tapping the screen to bring up the banking alert. I turned the screen towards him. "Read it, Marcus." His eyes darted to the screen. It was a notification from the bank. "Transfer declined. Account frozen. Security protocol alpha initiated." "You see," I whispered, "the account you tried to access does not exist anymore. It was a dummy account. I moved the real assets 3 days ago when I noticed the first unauthorized withdrawal attempt. The papers you signed, they were not transfer documents. They were an admission of financial liability. By signing them, you just assumed responsibility for every single debt this shell company owes." "No," Marcus whispered, his face turning gray. That is fraud." I straightened up, signaling Arthur to release him. Marcus slumped to the floor, rubbing his wrist, looking defeated. "No, Marcus. That is business. Just like you said." Arthur stepped back but kept his hand near the holster inside his jacket. I walked over to the bar and poured myself a glass of water. My throat was dry. The adrenaline was starting to fade, leaving a cold clarity in its wake. "So here's the situation." I took a sip, watching him over the rim of the glass. "You have no money. You have no hostage. You have confessed to fraud. And the cartel?" I paused, letting the word hang in the air like a guillotine blade. "They are going to be very disappointed when the wire transfer fails to arrive by midnight." Marcus looked up, his eyes filled with genuine terror. "You have to help me, Elena. If I do not pay them, they will kill me. They will not just shoot me. They will do things." "I know," I said, placing the glass down on the coaster. "I heard what they did to Leo. I heard his screams, Marcus. Do you think I care what they do to you? Please." He crawled forward, grabbing the hem of my dress, his pride completely gone. "I can fix this. We can leave. We can go to the Cayman Islands. I have money stashed there. We can start over." I looked down at his hand, grasping the wine-stained fabric. It was pathetic. I kicked his hand away, not violently, but with the disdain one would show a roach. "There is no we, Marcus. There never was. There was just you feeding off me like a parasite. And now the host is cutting you loose." I turned to Chloe, who was trembling so hard her jewelry was rattling. "And you, the aspiring Mrs. Sterling. I hope you enjoyed your brief tenure." Chloe stammered, unable to form words. She clutched the crocodile bag tighter. "Keep the bag," I said, giving her a sharp smile. "You are going to need something to sell for bail money." I walked towards the door, signaling Arthur to follow. "Where are you going?" Marcus scrambled to his feet, panic rising in his voice again. "You cannot leave me here. They are coming." I stopped at the threshold and looked back. The penthouse looked like a cage now, a gilded cage for a trapped rat. "I am not leaving you, Marcus. I am evicting you." I pulled a small remote from my pocket and pressed a button. Suddenly, loud metal shutters began to descend over the windows and the balcony doors. Clang, clang, clang. The sound was deafening. The apartment was going into lockdown mode. "What are you doing?" Marcus screamed, running towards the balcony, but the shutter slammed down before he could reach it. "This building belongs to the Vane Trust." I said, my voice calm over the mechanical noise. "I just activated the security lockdown. All exits are sealed. The elevators are disabled. You are trapped in here." "Why? Why are you doing this?" "Because I promised Damon I would save you for me. But I lied. I am not going to kill you, Marcus. I am going to let you sit in the dark and wait." "Wait for what?" he yelled, pounding on the reinforced glass of the foyer door, which was slowly sliding shut. "Wait for the people you owe money to," I said, as the glass door sealed with a hiss. "I forwarded your location to a contact I found on your phone, a man named El Carnicero. I believe that translates to the butcher. I told him you were trying to flee with his money." "No," Elena opened the door. I watched him pound on the glass, his mouth moving in silent screams as the soundproof seal engaged. He looked like a fish in a tank. A fish that knew the sharks were circling. Arthur pressed the elevator button. The doors opened immediately for us. "We are leaving, Arthur," I said, stepping into the car. "Take me to the clinic. I need to see my brother." As the elevator doors closed, the last thing I saw was Marcus Sterling sliding down the glass door, his face buried in his hands, sobbing. Beside him, Chloe was frantically digging through the crocodile bag looking for a phone, only to pull out the tracking device I had planted. She stared at it, realizing she had been carrying her own surveillance the whole time. The ride down was smooth. I leaned my head back against the wall of the elevator. My hands were shaking again, but this time it was from relief. The monster was trapped. The leverage was gone. But as the elevator hit the lobby, I knew this was far from over. Marcus was just a pawn. The butcher was coming. And when he found out the money was gone, he would not just stop at Marcus. He would come for the next person on the list. Me. I walked out into the rainy New York night. The air was cold and fresh. It smelled of rain and exhaust fumes. It smelled like freedom. But in the distance, I could hear sirens wailing. The city was awake, and the wolves were hunting. The private trauma clinic was buried deep within a nondescript brick building in the meatpacking district. It was a place that did not exist on Google Maps, a sterile purgatory for people who could afford to pay for silence along with their surgery. I walked down the long corridor, my heels clicking softly on the linoleum, a sound that echoed like a ticking clock in the hollow space. The air smelled of aggressive antiseptic and the metallic tang of dried blood. It was a smell that triggered a primal flight response in the lizard part of my brain, but I forced my legs to keep moving. I was not here to run. I was here to witness the cost of my hesitation. Damon met me outside room 4. The towering mercenary looked different without his tactical vest. He looked tired. His gray shirt was stained with sweat and dirt, and there was a grim set to his jaw that terrified me more than any weapon. He did not say a word. He just stepped aside and opened the heavy door. The hydraulic hiss of the seal breaking sounded like a gasp. I stepped inside. The room was dim-lit only by the rhythmic green glow of the heart monitor. Beep, beep, beep. That sound became the only thing tethering me to reality. In the center of the bed lay a figure that looked too small to be my brother. Leo was pale, his skin possessing a translucent waxy quality that made him look like a marble statue. But it was his hands that stole the air from my lungs. They were heavily wrapped in thick layers of white gauze resting on pillows like fragile artifacts. The white fabric was already spotted with fresh blooms of crimson red. I approached the bed, my knees trembling so hard I had to grab the metal railing for support. The cold steel bit into my palm, grounding me. I looked at those hands. Hands that had played the violin with a virtuoso's grace just 2 days ago. Hands that were supposed to sign college applications. Now they were ruined. I did not need a doctor to tell me the damage was catastrophic. The angle of the wrapping suggested crushed bones and severed tendons. The butcher's men had not just hurt him. They had taken his future. He is sedated. Damon's voice came from the shadows, deep and rough like gravel. We gave him enough morphine to knock out a horse. He did not cry when we pulled him out, Elena. He just stared. I reached out to brush a lock of damp hair from Leo's forehead. His skin was burning hot. A fever. The body's response to trauma. A tear finally escaped my eye, tracking a hot line down my cold cheek. I quickly wiped it away. Tears would not fix his hands. Tears would not pay the debt. Did he say anything? I whispered, my voice cracking. Damon shifted his weight, his boots squeaking on the floor. He said he was sorry. He thought it was his fault for losing the ring. A sob threatened to tear its way out of my throat, but I swallowed it down. It tasted like acid. He was apologizing for being tortured. The level of psychological damage Marcus had inflicted was invisible, but far deeper than the physical wounds. I turned away from the bed, unable to look at the red stains on the gauze any longer. I needed to focus. I needed to be the shark again. Is the perimeter secure? I asked, looking at Damon. For now. Damon crossed his arms. But we have a problem. A big one. When we raided the warehouse, we found a phone on one of the guards. It had a direct line to someone in Mexico. We recovered a text message sent 10 minutes before we breached. I felt a cold shiver crawl up my spine. What did it say? It was a location drop. Damon's eyes were dark. It was the coordinates for this clinic. The room suddenly felt very small and very airless. The only sound was the relentless beep, beep, beep of the monitor speeding up slightly, as if Leo's subconscious could sense the danger. Marcus! I hissed the name like a curse. Not Marcus. Damon shook his head. Marcus is too stupid to know about this place. This place is off the grid. Only 3 people knew about it. Me, you, and the contact who set it up. Who? I demanded. Damon hesitated. The contact was compromised. We found him dead in the trunk of a car 3 blocks away. Whoever the butcher is, he is not just a loan shark. He has eyes everywhere. He knew we would bring Leo here. This wasn't a rescue, Elena. It was a funnel. They herded us here. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. We were not safe. We were in a trap. The silence of the clinic suddenly felt oppressive, heavy with impending violence. We need to move him, I said, grabbing the handle of the hospital bed. Now. Too late. The lights went out. It was not a flicker. It was a hard, instant plunge into total darkness. The heart monitor let out a long, shrill warning tone as it switched to battery backup, the green line glowing eerily in the black void. The electronic locks on the doors clicked a sound that usually meant safety, but now sounded like the ceiling of a tomb. Stay down. Damon ordered, his voice dropping to a combat whisper. He moved towards the door, his silhouette barely visible against the faint light coming from the emergency exit sign in the hallway. I heard the distinct metallic slide of a slide being racked on a handgun. Then came the sound. It was not gunfire. It was the sound of the fire alarm system engaging. But there was no siren. Instead, the sprinklers overhead hissed to life, spraying a fine mist of water down on us. It hit the floor with a sound like static interference. They cut the power to disable the cameras, Damon said, backing away from the door. And the sprinklers are to mask their footsteps. These are professionals. I threw my body over Leo, shielding his face from the cold water. He stirred, moaning softly in his drug-induced sleep. I felt the water soaking into my dress, mixing with the dried wine stain. It was cold, freezing cold. Damon, how many exits? I asked, trying to keep the panic from my voice. 2. Main entrance and the loading dock. Both will be covered. Damon moved a heavy metal cabinet in front of the door. The sound of steel scraping on linoleum was deafening. We are sitting ducks in here. We need a weapon. Do you have the piece I gave you? I reached into my clutch past the wet Tiffany box and pulled out the small compact pistol Damon had forced me to buy a year ago. It felt heavy and alien in my hand. I had never fired it outside of a range. Safety off, Damon commanded. Point at the door. If it opens and it is not me, you pull the trigger until it clicks. Suddenly, the glass panel on the door shattered. Crash. The sound was explosive in the confined space. A canister the size of a soda can rolled into the room, hissing violently. Gas, Damon yelled, lunging forward to kick the canister back out, but it spun erratically, spewing thick white smoke. I coughed, the acrid taste of tear gas hitting the back of my throat instantly. My eyes started to burn. I buried my face in Leo's blanket, trying to filter the air. Get him up, Damon shouted, grabbing the head of the bed. We are moving. We can't, I screamed over the hissing gas. His IVs. Rip them out, or he dies. I didn't think. I just acted. I grabbed the tubes connected to my brother's arm and pulled. Leo jerked awake, screaming, a sound of raw, confused pain that tore through my heart. Blood sprayed onto the white sheets. I grabbed the railing and pushed. The wheels of the bed squeaked as we rammed it towards the door. Damon kicked the cabinet aside and threw the door open. The hallway was filled with smoke and the flashing red strobe of the silent alarm. At the far end of the corridor, I saw them. 3 figures, dressed in black, wearing gas masks. They moved with a terrifying fluid synchronization. They saw us. One of them raised a rifle. Damon raised his pistol and fired. Bang, bang, bang. The shots were deafening in the hallway. One of the figures dropped. The other 2 scrambled for cover, returning fire. Bullets chipped the plaster off the walls around us, dusting my hair with white powder. Back, go back. Damon shoved the bed back into the room. We were pinned, trapped in a room filled with gas, with a bleeding boy and a hallway full of killers. The window, I gasped, coughing violently. Damon, the window. We are on the 3rd floor, Elena. I ran to the window and pulled the blinds up. Below us was the alleyway, dark and wet with rain. But directly below the window was the roof of a delivery truck. It was a drop of maybe 15 feet. Push him out, I yelled, wiping the tears from my burning eyes. We have to drop him. Are you insane? Damon looked at me like I had lost my mind. They are going to kill him, Damon. I grabbed the sheets and started wrapping them around Leo's body, cocooning him. We lower him. Now. Damon looked at the door where bullets were now chewing through the wood, then at the window. He holstered his gun and grabbed the other end of the sheet. On 3, he grunted. We lifted Leo. He was dead weight, moaning in delirium. My muscles screamed in protest. We hauled him to the windowsill. The rain lashed against my face, mixing with the gas smoke. 1, 2, 3. We pushed. Leo's body slid over the edge. For a second he hung there, suspended in the void. Then he fell. Thud. It was a heavy, sickening sound as he hit the metal roof of the truck below. I leaned out, praying to see movement. He lay still. Elena moved. Damon grabbed me and pulled me down just as the door to the room was kicked off its hinges. A man in a gas mask stepped in, holding a suppressed assault rifle. He looked at the empty bed, then at us huddled by the window. He did not speak. He just raised the weapon. I raised my small pistol. My hand was shaking uncontrollably. I squeezed the trigger. Click! I had forgotten to rack the slide. The man in the mask chuckled, a low, distorted sound. "Mrs. Sterling, the butcher sends his regards." The sound of the firing pin hitting empty air echoed in the small room like a gavel sentencing me to death. Click. It was the loudest sound I had ever heard. The hitman behind the gas mask did not fire immediately. He paused. A fraction of a second. A moment of pure arrogance to savor the terror in my eyes before the kill. That pause was his mistake. It was the only opening a man like Damon needed. Damon roared a sound that was less human and more like a wounded bear charging. He launched himself from the floor, ignoring the bullets that had grazed him moments before. He did not go for the gun. He went for the man's throat. The impact was sickeningly heavy. Thud. The hitman was slammed backward against the tiled wall with enough force to crack the ceramic. The assault rifle clattered to the floor, skidding across the wet linoleum. "Run!" Damon screamed, his voice strained with exertion as he grappled with the masked figure. I did not freeze. The fear that had paralyzed me was gone, replaced by a cold, mechanical instinct for survival. I scrambled to my feet, my shoes slipping on the wet floor. I looked at the window. The rain was lashing in a gray curtain. Below lay the metal roof of the delivery truck where we had dropped Leo. I climbed onto the sill. The wind hit me instantly, a freezing gust that bit into my wet skin. I looked back. Damon was losing. The hitman was younger, stronger, and he had pulled a knife. I saw the glint of steel in the dim light, followed by a sharp intake of breath from Damon. A grunt of pain. I could not leave him. I looked at the heavy pistol in my hand, the useless lump of metal that had failed me. I racked the slide back hard, ejecting the dud round. It spun in the air, catching the light before hitting the floor with a metallic ting. I gripped the weapon with both hands. "Damon, drop!" I screamed. Damon didn't question. He collapsed his knees, dropping his weight instantly. The hitman was left standing, exposed, his knife raised for a killing blow. He looked at me, his masked face tilting slightly in surprise. I pulled the trigger. This time, there was no click. Bang! The recoil traveled up my arm, shocking my shoulder. The sound was deafening in the confined space. I did not see where the bullet hit, but the hitman jerked violently backward as if an invisible hammer had struck him in the chest. He crumpled to the floor, wheezing a wet, rattling sound that bubbled through his mask. "Move." Damon scrambled up, clutching his side. His hand was pressed against his ribs and dark liquid was seeping between his fingers. He grabbed my arm, pulling me towards the window. "We are burned. Jump." We did not climb. We threw ourselves into the void. For a heartbeat, there was nothing but gravity and the rushing sound of the wind. Then impact. Wham! We hit the roof of the truck hard. The metal buckled under us with a loud groan. The shockwave traveled through my knees, knocking the breath out of me. I rolled, absorbing the momentum, my dress tearing against the rough anti-slip surface of the roof. "Leo," I gasped, crawling across the wet metal. My brother was lying near the edge, soaked and shivering but breathing. I grabbed his shirt, pulling him away from the precipice. He moaned a sound of pure misery. Suddenly, the truck engine roared to life beneath us, a deep diesel rumble that vibrated through my bones. The driver had heard the bodies hitting the roof. "Hold on," Damon yelled, grabbing Leo's belt. The truck lurched forward. I was thrown back, sliding towards the rear edge. My fingers scrambled for purchase on the slick metal, finding nothing but rain and rust. I slid until my heels hooked onto the rear gutter, leaving me dangling precariously over the asphalt that was now moving past at an alarming speed. Damon lunged, grabbing my wrist. His grip was iron-hot and reassuring. He hauled me back up just as the truck swerved onto the main road. Horns blared around us, a chaotic symphony of city traffic. We were on top of a moving delivery truck speeding through the meatpacking district in the pouring rain. "We need to stop this truck," I yelled over the roar of the wind. Damon crawled towards the front of the box. Stay with the kid. He reached the front edge and swung himself down, kicking the driver's side window. Crash. Glass shattered. I heard a shout of surprise from inside the cab, followed by the sound of a struggle. The truck swerved violently, throwing me against Leo. I wrapped my arms around my brother, shielding his broken hands from the impact. The truck fishtailed tires, screeching a high-pitched wail of protest against the wet pavement. Then it steadied. Damon's voice came from the cab, shouting up at us. I got the wheel. Hang on. We sped up, weaving through traffic. I looked back. 2 black SUVs were peeling out of the alleyway behind us, their high beams cutting through the rain like searchlights. They were fast. Much faster than a delivery truck. Gunshots cracked behind us. Pop, pop, pop. I heard the bullets striking the back door of the truck below us. A metallic pinging sound like hail on a tin roof. They were shooting to kill. Get inside, Damon yelled. The cargo door. I crawled to the back of the truck. The rear door was a roll-up style. It was locked. I pounded on it, frustration rising in my throat. It would not budge. Elena. The latch. Damon shouted from the cab. Shoot the latch. I raised the gun again. My hands were shaking from the cold and the adrenaline. I aimed at the padlock securing the door. I had 3 rounds left. Bang. Missed. The bullet sparked off the metal frame. The SUVs were gaining. I could see the muzzle flashes from their windows. Bang. Hit. The padlock shattered. I holstered the gun and grabbed the handle, hauling the door up with every ounce of strength I had left. It rattled open, revealing the dark, cavernous interior of the truck. It was full of frozen meat carcasses hanging from hooks, swaying eerily with the motion of the vehicle. I grabbed Leo, dragging him towards the opening. We have to jump in. I screamed at him, though he was barely conscious. We tumbled inside, landing on the cold metal floor amongst the swinging slabs of beef. I pulled the door down, shutting out the rain and the headlights just as a burst of automatic fire strafed the back of the truck, punching holes of light through the thin aluminum door. We were in the dark again. The smell of raw meat and blood was overwhelming. I lay there in the freezing cold, holding my brother, listening to the tires humming beneath us and the relentless pursuit outside. We were alive, but we were trapped in a rolling freezer with killers on our tail and nowhere to go. And then I felt it. Leo's hand, the one wrapped in bloody gauze. He squeezed my arm. A weak, desperate pressure. Elena, he whispered, his voice a dry rasp. I remembered. Remembered what, Leo? I asked, brushing wet hair from his face. The account numbers. He coughed. Marcus. He made me memorize them before the hammer. I froze. Marcus had forced Leo to memorize the offshore accounts where he was hiding the rest of his stolen money. The money he hadn't told me about. The money the butcher was looking for. I smiled in the dark. A cold, dangerous smile that no one could see. Damon, I shouted towards the cab wall. Drive fast. We have the leverage. The world inside the cargo hold was a swinging pendulum of frozen flesh and darkness. The truck careened around a corner, throwing me against the metal ribs of the container. A slab of beef, hard as concrete, swung on its hook and slammed into my shoulder, sending a jolt of pain down my arm that nearly made me drop my gun. Beneath us, the tires screamed a high-pitched wail of tortured rubber struggling for grip on the rain-slicked asphalt. Hang on! Damon's voice roared from the cab, barely audible over the deafening rattle of the uninsulated metal box. I am going to brake check them. Brace for impact. I grabbed Leo, pulling him into the space between 2 hanging carcasses. I wrapped my arms around his shivering body, pressing his face into my chest to muffle the sound. Brace, I yelled. The truck did not just slow down. It locked up. The deceleration was violent and instant. The laws of physics took over. Inside the box, we were thrown forward, but the SUVs behind us were not so lucky. Crash! The sound was apocalyptic. It was the sound of expensive German engineering crumpling against American industrial steel. Glass shattered in a cascading symphony. Metal screamed as it folded. The truck lurched forward from the impact, then slammed to a halt. For a second there was silence. Then the hissing of radiator steam and the groaning of twisted metal. Damon did not wait. The truck engine roared again, grinding gears as he floored it, dragging the wreckage of the lead SUV for a few feet before shaking it loose. We were moving again, but the ride was rougher now. One of the rear tires had blown. I could hear the thump, thump, thump of the rubber shredding flapping against the wheel, well like a broken wing. "We have maybe 2 miles before this rim disintegrates," Damon shouted. "I am heading for the safe harbor. It is going to be close." I checked Leo. He was barely conscious, his eyes rolling back in his head. The adrenaline that had kept him talking was fading, replaced by the gray pallor of shock. His hands wrapped in the dirty sheets were trembling violently. "Stay with me, Leo," I whispered, rubbing his arms to generate heat. The freezer truck was doing its job too well. The temperature was dropping. We were freezing to death in a getaway vehicle. The truck swerved sharply one last time, then slowed. The suspension groaned as we rolled over a curb and came to a stop. The engine died. Out. Now. Damon's face appeared at the roll-up door, his skin pale and slick with sweat. He hauled the door open. We were in a dark alleyway beneath the rusting iron arches of the Williamsburg Bridge. The rain was still falling, masking the noise of the city. We scrambled out. My legs were numb. I hit the wet pavement and nearly collapsed. Damon grabbed Leo, slinging the boy over his shoulder in a fireman's carry, despite the dark stain spreading on the side of his own shirt. "This way." Damon grunted, pointing to a metal door set into the brickwork of an old veterinary supply warehouse. He kicked the lock. Bang. It held. He kicked it again, summoning a reserve of strength that defied his injuries. Bang. The wood splintered. We stumbled inside. The air was warm and smelled of disinfectant and dog food. It was a vet clinic closed for the night. Damon kicked the door shut behind us and engaged the deadbolt. "Exam room 2. He wheezed, leaning heavily against the wall. "They have a surgical suite." We laid Leo on the stainless steel exam table. It was cold but cleaner than the truck. I scrambled to find the light switch. The fluorescent tubes flickered to life, humming with a low electrical buzz that felt abrasive to my heightened senses. The light revealed the extent of the damage. Leo looked like a corpse. And Damon. Damon was holding his side where a jagged tear in his shirt revealed a deep graze from a bullet or a knife. Blood was pulsing dark and steady. "I am fine," Damon lied, his teeth gritted. "Focus on the kid." I ran to the cabinets, ripping them open. My hand swept aside boxes of flea medication and heartworm pills until I found what I needed: gauze, saline, betadine, antibiotics, and a surgical stapler. I ran back to the table. "I need to clean his hands," I said, my voice trembling. "This is going to hurt him, Damon." "Do it." Damon leaned against the counter, gripping a bottle of veterinary whiskey he had found. "The kid is tough. He is a Vane." I unwrapped the dirty sheets from Leo's hands. The smell hit me first. The metallic copper scent of old blood mixed with the infection that was already setting in. I peeled back the last layer of gauze. I gagged. I had to turn away for a second, squeezing my eyes shut. The nails. Marcus's men had driven carpentry nails through the palms. They had removed the nails before we arrived, but the wounds were angry, ragged holes. I poured the saline. Leo screamed. It was a thin, high-pitched sound that cut straight through my soul. He thrashed on the table. "Hold him down," I yelled at Damon. Damon moved, pinning Leo's shoulders with his good arm. "I am sorry, kid. I am so sorry." I worked fast. My movements were jerky but efficient. Wash. Disinfect. Wrap. Every touch was torture, but it was the only way to save the hands, to save the musician. By the time I finished, Leo had passed out from the pain. His breathing was shallow, but steady. I slumped against the counter. My dress ruined my hands, stained pink. I looked at Damon. He was sliding down the wall, leaving a red smear on the white paint. "Your turn," I said, picking up the stapler. Damon chuckled, a wet, rasping sound. "Just patch it. Do not kiss it better." I lifted his shirt. The wound was a long gash along his ribs. Deep, but it had missed the vitals. I cleaned it with a splash of the whiskey. Damon hissed, his whole body tensing like a steel cable. "On 3, I said, positioning the stapler. "Just do it." Click, thunk, click, thunk, click, thunk. The sound of the surgical staples biting into skin was barbaric. 5 staples. Damon did not scream. He just exhaled a long, shuddering breath and took a massive swig from the bottle. "We are alive," he whispered. "For now." I walked over to the sink and scrubbed my hands. The water turned red, then clear. I looked at my reflection in the metal dispenser. The woman staring back was unrecognizable. Her eyes were dead. "We have maybe an hour before they start checking private clinics," Damon said, capping the bottle. "We need a new plan. We have no leverage. Marcus has the police looking for us as kidnappers. The butcher has hitmen looking for us as thieves. We are squeezed from both sides." I dried my hands with a paper towel. The rough texture felt grounding. "We have leverage," I said, walking over to where Leo lay. I leaned down to my brother's ear. "Leo, can you hear me?" Leo's eyelids fluttered. "Elena." "The numbers, Leo. The ones Marcus made you memorize. Tell me." Leo swallowed hard, his throat clicking dryly. He whispered a string of digits. 10 numbers, then a routing code, then a password. Orpheus. I grabbed Damon's laptop from his tactical bag, which he had dropped by the door. I sat on a stool, my fingers flying across the keyboard. I accessed the offshore banking portal Leo had described. It was a Cayman Islands shadow bank, the kind that did not ask questions as long as you had the codes. I entered the user ID, the password. "Access granted." The screen flashed. I stared at the balance. My breath hitched. $150 million. It was not just Marcus's debt money. It was everything. It was the cartel's operating fund for the entire East Coast. Marcus had been holding it in escrow, preparing to launder it. Damon whistled low. "That is a lot of zeros. That is not just stealing from the cookie jar, Elena. That is stealing the whole bakery. If I transfer this money," I started to say, my finger hovering over the enter key. "If you transfer that money, you become the most wanted woman in the underworld." Damon warned, his voice serious. "The butcher will not stop. He will burn New York to the ground to find you." "He is already burning it," I said, my eyes hardening. "But if I leave the money here, Marcus can use it to pay his debt. He survives. He wins." I looked at Leo's ruined hands. I thought about the finger in the Tiffany box. If I steal it, Marcus cannot pay. The butcher will kill him for losing the money. "And then he comes for you," Damon added. "Let him come." I started typing. I did not transfer the money to my account. That would be too easy to trace. Instead, I broke it up. I sent 10 million to the Red Cross, 10 million to a cat shelter in Brooklyn, 10 million to the NYPD Widows Fund. "What are you doing?" Damon asked, watching the screen in disbelief. "I am liquidating his assets," I said, typing furiously. "I am scattering the money to 1,000 charities across the globe. By the time they reverse the transactions, the money will be mixed with legitimate funds. It is gone." I hit the final key. Transfer complete. Balance 0. I turned the laptop screen towards Damon. Marcus Sterling is now broke, and he owes the Mexican cartel $150 million that he just donated to charity. Suddenly, the laptop screen glitched. The banking page disappeared, replaced by a black screen with a single white line of text. "I see you." A chill went through the room that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. How I whispered. He traced the login. Damon drew his weapon, struggling to his feet. "He has a cyber team. They were watching the account waiting for Marcus to move the funds. The phone on the wall of the vet clinic rang. It was an old landline. It shrilled loud and demanding in the silence. Ring, ring. Damon looked at me. Do not answer it. I walked over to the phone. My hand hovered over the receiver. I had initiated the war. I had to face the general. I picked it up. Hello. A voice answered. It was not digital. It was smooth-cultured and terrifyingly calm. It sounded like a grandfather reading a bedtime story. Mrs. Sterling, you have a very expensive sense of humor. It is Miss Vane. I corrected him, my voice steady despite the fear clutching my heart. And I assume I am speaking to the butcher. You stole from me, Elena. The voice sighed. That was unwise. Marcus was a disappointment, but he was a manageable disappointment. You are a problem. I did not steal. I donated. It is tax deductible. There was a pause. Then a low chuckle. I like you. You have fire. Most people just scream, but fire burns, Elena. You have exactly 1 hour to return my funds. Or what I asked. Or I will stop hunting you. And I will start hunting the list of names on your brother's college application contact sheet. His friends. His teachers. His little girlfriend, Sarah. The blood drained from my face. He had deep intel. Leave them out of this. 1 hour, the butcher said. Or I will turn your city into a slaughterhouse. And I will start by peeling the skin off your husband while you watch on FaceTime. Consider him a down payment. The line went dead. I hung up the phone. I looked at Damon. He knows. Damon checked the magazine of his pistol. 1 hour. I nodded. Then we need to move. We are not safe here. And Elena. Yes. If he is coming for us, we stop running. We attack. I looked at the laptop screen where the words "I see you" were still blinking. No, I said, grabbing the laptop. We do not attack. We bait. He wants his money. I will tell him exactly where to come and get it. Where? Damon asked, hefting Leo up again. The only place in this city where a butcher belongs. Rain had turned into a torrential downpour, washing the grime of the city into the gutters. We were in a stolen station wagon, a rusted beige Volvo that smelled of wet dog and stale cigarettes. It was the veterinarian's car. Not exactly a getaway vehicle for a billionaire heiress, but anonymity was our only armor now. Damon drove with one hand, the other pressed against his stapled side, his breathing shallow and rhythmic, like a bellows struggling to fan a dying fire. In the back seat, Leo slept the drug-induced sleep of the innocent, wrapped in a wool blanket we had scavenged. Where are we going, Elena? Damon asked, his eyes scanning the rearview mirror for headlights that might belong to a cartel hit squad. You said you knew a place. The Bronx, I said, looking out at the blurred city lights. Hunts Point. There is an old facility there. The Vane Industrial Ice Plant. The ice plant, Damon frowned, wincing as the car hit a pothole. That place has been condemned for 10 years. It is a rust bucket. It is a fortress, I corrected him. My father built it during the Cold War. The walls are 3 feet of reinforced concrete. It has its own generator. And more importantly, it is filled with ammonia piping for the refrigeration units. If you shoot the wrong pipe, you do not just get a leak. You get a cloud of toxic gas that can clear a city block. Damon glanced at me, a flicker of appreciation in his pain-filled eyes. You want to gas them? I want to level the playing field. I checked the charge on the burner phone I had taken from the clinic. The butcher said he wants his money. He thinks he is coming to collect a refund. He does not know he is walking into a pressure cooker. I dialed the number again. My hand was steady. Fear had burned out, leaving only a cold, terrifying clarity. Ring! Ring! He answered on the first ring. No hello, just the sound of breathing. I have a counteroffer, I said. I am listening, Mrs. Sterling. The butcher's voice was smooth, unhurried. But I hope for your sake it involves a routing number. I cannot reverse the transactions remotely. I lied. The bank requires a biometric key, my retina scan. I have to be physically present at the terminal to override the donation. A pause. You expect me to believe that? Believe what you want. But right now, $150 million is sitting in the accounts of the Red Cross. Unless I scan my eye in the next 45 minutes, it stays there. And I assume your partners in Mexico will not accept a tax write-off as payment. There was a low, dangerous hum on the line. Where? The Vane ice plant in the Bronx. Come alone. Or bring an army. It does not matter. If I see a single laser sight before I see your face, I smash the laptop and the money is gone forever. And my down payment, he asked, referring to Marcus. I looked at the rain lashing the window. Bring him. I unlocked the security shutters on the penthouse 5 minutes ago. Your men can go pick him up. I want him there. I want him to watch. Excellent. The butcher sounded genuinely pleased. A family reunion. I will bring the wine. You bring the money. 1 hour, Elena. Do not be late. Click. I lowered the phone. The die was cast. I had just invited the two most dangerous men in my life to the same location, and I intended for neither of them to leave. We arrived at the facility 20 minutes later. The building loomed out of the darkness, a massive skeletal structure of brick and iron sitting on the edge of the East River. It looked like a dead beast rotting on the shore. The wind howled through the broken windows, a mournful sound that raised the hairs on my arms. We pulled the car into the loading bay hidden from the main road. Damon killed the engine. The silence that followed was heavy. Check the generator, I said, opening the back door to get Leo. I will get him to the foreman's office upstairs. It has a steel door. Damon nodded, moving stiffly. He grabbed his tactical bag, which was now depressingly light on ammo. I will rig the main entrance. We have some road flares and a can of gasoline. It is not C4, but it will make a statement. I hauled Leo up the rusty metal stairs. My heels rang out against the grating clang, 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 echoing in the vast empty cavern of the factory. Shadows stretched long and distorted around us. The air inside was freezing colder than the rain outside. It smelled of old rust and faint lingering chemicals. I reached the office. It was a small glass-walled box overlooking the main factory floor. I laid Leo on the dusty leather couch. I took the gun, Damon's backup piece, and placed it in Leo's bandaged hand. Leo, I whispered, shaking him gently. He groaned, his eyes fluttering open. Elena, where? Listen to me. I leaned close, my voice fierce. Do not move. Do not make a sound. If anyone opens that door and it is not me or Damon, you pull the trigger. You squeeze until the gun is empty. Do you understand? He nodded weakly, tears leaking from his eyes. I understand. I kissed his forehead. It was cold. I am going to end this, Leo. Tonight. I locked the door from the outside and descended the stairs. Damon was on the ground floor pouring gasoline in a wide arc in front of the main bay doors. The fumes were dizzying, overpowering the smell of rust. They are coming, Damon said, not looking up. I saw headlights turning off the highway. 3 SUVs, maybe 4. He brought an army, I said, smoothing my dress. Of course he did. Damon tossed the empty gas can aside. He is a businessman. He does not take risks. Damon limped over to a large yellow tank connected to a complex web of pipes running along the ceiling. He pointed to a valve. This is the main ammonia feed. It is old, but it is pressurized. If I blow this valve, the whole ground floor fills with gas in 30 seconds. And us, I asked. We have about 10 seconds to get to the roof access before our lungs melt. Damon checked his watch. It is a one-way trip, Elena. I looked at the massive sliding doors at the front of the factory. Headlights swept across the glass, illuminating the falling rain. Engines rumbled outside. Doors slammed. They are here. I walked to the center of the factory floor. I stood in a pool of light from a single skylight above. I looked small. I looked vulnerable. I looked exactly like the prey they expected. Damon melted into the shadows, climbing up into the gantries overhead. He was the ghost in the machine. The massive bay doors groaned. Someone was pushing them open. The metal screeched in protest, a sound like nails on a chalkboard amplified 1,000 times. The doors slid apart. Silhouetted against the rain and the headlights of the convoy stood a phalanx of men, at least a dozen, heavily armed. In the center stood a man in a bespoke white suit holding a black umbrella. He looked immaculate amidst the filth. The butcher. And kneeling beside him, his face bruised and bloody, his hands zip-tied behind his back, was Marcus. The butcher stepped forward, his shoes clicking on the concrete. He smiled, a warm grandfatherly smile. "Mrs. Sterling, you chose a very dramatic stage." I stood my ground, my hands empty at my sides. "I figured a man of your reputation appreciates the theatrical." The butcher laughed softly. He signaled to his men. They fanned out, weapons raised, checking the corners. They were moving into the kill zone. "I brought your down payment." The butcher gestured to one of his guards, who hauled Marcus up and shoved him forward. Marcus stumbled, falling to his knees at my feet. He looked up at me. His lip was split. His eye swollen shut. "Elena," he rasped, spitting blood. "Give him the money. Please. He is going to skin me." I looked down at my husband, the man who had sent me a finger in a box, the man who had tried to sell my life. "Hello, Marcus," I said softly. "You look terrible." The butcher collapsed his umbrella, handing it to a guard. He walked towards me, stopping just outside the circle of gasoline Damon had poured. He sniffed the air. Gasoline. Really? He looked disappointed. I expected something more sophisticated from a Vane. A match is a poor weapon against a bullet, Elena. "It is not a weapon," I said, reaching into my pocket. I pulled out a road flare. The red plastic was bright in the gloom. "It is a signal." I cracked the flare. Hiss! It sparked to life, sputtering a brilliant, blinding crimson light. Smoke curled up, acrid and red. The butcher's men raised their rifles. "Do not shoot," Marcus screamed. "She has the codes." The butcher held up a hand, stopping his men. He looked at the flare, then at me. His eyes narrowed. "You are bluffing. You want to negotiate." "No," I said, tossing the sputtering flare onto the gasoline-soaked concrete. "I want to resign." The flare hit the fuel. Whoosh! A wall of fire erupted between us. It was instant and violent, a curtain of heat and light that separated me from them. Marcus screamed, scrambling back from the flames. The butcher took a step back, his white suit illuminated by the orange inferno. "Now, Damon," I yelled into the roar of the fire. High above in the darkness, a single gunshot rang out. Ping! The bullet struck the valve on the yellow ammonia tank. The sound was not an explosion. It was a scream. A high-pitched mechanical shriek as the valve sheared off, and 2,000 pounds of pressurized anhydrous ammonia fought to escape its steel prison all at once. The yellow tank vomited a dense white cloud that expanded with terrifying velocity. It hit the floor and rolled outward like a living avalanche, consuming the space where the fire was raging. The flames did not die, but they turned a sickly, ghostly blue as the chemical reaction fed on the oxygen. I did not wait to see the chemistry. I turned and ran. I held my breath, my lungs already burning from the exertion, but I clamped my mouth shut, knowing that a single inhale of that white fog would sear the lining of my throat and drown me in my own fluids. I scrambled towards the metal staircase, my heels slipping on the wet concrete. Behind me, the factory floor descended into immediate chaos. The shouting of the butcher's men turned into wet, gagging coughs. The gunfire started. Pop, pop, pop. Blind panic. They were shooting at the smoke, at the shadows, at the burning sensation in their eyes. A bullet sparked off the railing inches from my hand, sending a vibration of heat through the metal. I did not flinch. I hauled myself up the stairs 2 at a time, my legs burning. Below me, I heard Marcus. His voice rose above the hissing gas, a sound of raw, unadulterated terror. Elena, help me, it burns. Oh God, it burns. I did not look back. I could picture him perfectly, kneeling on the concrete, his hands tied behind his back, unable to cover his face as the caustic cloud enveloped him. He was paying the price. He wanted the money. Now he was swallowing the cost. I reached the first landing. My chest was heaving, demanding air. I pressed my face into the crook of my elbow, filtering the air through the wet silk of my dress. It smelled of ammonia, strong enough to make my eyes water, but it was breathable. I risked a glance downward. The ground floor was gone. It was just a swirling sea of white vapor illuminated by the flickering orange and blue of the gasoline fire. In that fog, bodies were stumbling and falling. The coughing had stopped for some, replaced by the sickening sound of retching. But one figure was not falling. Through the haze, a silhouette moved with calm, purposeful strides. He was not coughing. He was not stumbling. The butcher. He stopped near where Marcus lay writhing. He did not help him. He stepped over him. I saw him adjust something on his face. A gas mask. A sleek military-grade respirator. He had come prepared for a trap. He had anticipated a chemical threat. He looked up. The lenses of his mask caught the light, reflecting like the eyes of a giant insect. He saw me. He raised his arm. He held a long-barreled pistol equipped with a laser sight. A red dot danced on the metal grating at my feet. Ping! The bullet struck the step I had just vacated. I scrambled higher, pulling myself onto the catwalk that led to the foreman's office. The air up here was thinner, but the gas was rising fast. It was chasing me. Damon! I tried to shout, but it came out as a croak. Above me, in the darkness of the rafters, I saw a muzzle flash. Bang! Damon fired down. The butcher sidestepped calmly, the bullet sparking harmlessly off the machinery. He fired back. 3 rapid shots. Bam! 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 I heard a grunt from above, followed by the sound of something heavy hitting the metal walkway. Damon was hit. Or pinned. I reached the office door. It was a heavy steel fire door with a reinforced glass window. Inside, I could see Leo sitting on the couch. The gun pointed at the door, his eyes wide with fear. Leo, open it. I banged on the glass. Leo hesitated. He saw a woman with wild hair, a torn dress, and a face streaked with soot. He raised the gun, trembling. It is me, I screamed, my voice raw. Recognition flooded his eyes. He scrambled off the couch and fumbled with the lock. The bolt slid back. I threw the door open and fell inside, slamming it shut behind me and engaging the lock just as the white tendrils of ammonia gas began to lick at the frame. The silence inside the office was shocking. The thick glass and concrete walls cut off the roar of the gas and the screams below. It was like stepping into a vacuum. I collapsed against the door, gasping for clean air, my lungs heaving. Elena Leo crawled towards me. You are bleeding. I checked my arms. Scrapes. Burns. But no bullet holes. I am fine. I stood up, checking the seal on the door. It was holding. We were in a bubble. A safe aquarium in the middle of a toxic ocean. Where is Damon? Leo asked, clutching the gun. He is... up there. I pointed to the ceiling. Suddenly a shadow fell over the office. I turned slowly. Standing on the catwalk just outside the glass wall was the butcher. He looked like a nightmare. The white suit was spotless. The black gas mask completely obscured his face. He stood there watching us like specimens in a jar. He raised his gloved hand and knocked gently on the glass. Tap, tap, tap. Leo screamed and raised the gun, firing blindly. Bang. The glass spiderwebbed but did not shatter. It was reinforced safety glass. The bullet embedded itself in the laminate. The butcher did not flinch. He tilted his head, appearing amused. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small black device. It looked like a remote detonator or a specialized breaching tool. He attached it to the glass right over the lock mechanism. He stepped back and pointed at the device, then mimed a countdown with his fingers. 3, 2, 1. Get back. I grabbed Leo and dragged him behind the heavy oak desk. Crack! It wasn't an explosion. It was a sonic pulse. The glass around the lock shattered, turning into thousands of harmless pebbles that rained down on the floor. The butcher reached through the hole and turned the handle. The door swung open. The sound of the factory rushed in, the hiss of gas, the crackle of fire, and with it, the smell. The ammonia flooded the small office instantly. I coughed, burying my face in my shirt again. The butcher stepped inside. He did not shoot. He walked over to the desk and kicked it aside, effortlessly exposing us. He looked down at me. His voice came through the mask, mechanized and deep like a robot. The transaction, Elena, reverse it. I looked up at him, my eyes streaming tears from the gas. I cannot. I wheezed. I told you. It is done. The butcher sighed, the sound amplified by his mask. Then you are of no use to me. He raised his pistol, aiming at Leo's head. No, I lunged forward, grabbing his leg. He kicked me, a brutal, efficient strike to the ribs that sent me sprawling across the room. I gasped for air and got a lungful of poison. My vision started to tunnel. The butcher racked the slide of his gun. Goodbye, Mr. Vane. Thwack. A dark shape swung down from the ceiling outside the office. It crashed through the remaining glass of the window, shattering the entire pane. It swung on a cable like a wrecking ball. Damon. He slammed into the butcher with the force of a freight train. Both men went flying, crashing into the wall. The gun skittered across the floor. Run, Damon yelled. He had tied a winch cable around his waist and jumped from the rafters. He was bleeding from a shoulder wound, but he was fighting with the desperation of a dying man. He grappled with the butcher, punching the gas mask, trying to crack the lenses. I scrambled for the gun. My fingers brushed the cold metal. The butcher was stronger. He drove a knee into Damon's gut, doubling him over, then grabbed Damon by the throat and slammed him against the jagged remains of the window frame. Glass sliced into Damon's back. I gripped the gun. I raised it. My hand was shaking violently from the lack of oxygen. I could not aim. If I fired, I might hit Damon. The butcher reached for a knife on his belt, a serrated blade that caught the orange light of the fire below. He raised it to plunge it into Damon's neck. I did not shoot the butcher. I shot the fire extinguisher mounted on the wall next to his head. Bang. The compressed cylinder exploded. A cloud of white chemical powder burst out with tremendous force, blasting directly into the butcher's face, blinding him and coating the lenses of his mask. He roared, stumbling back, releasing Damon. Damon dropped to the floor, gasping. I grabbed Leo, the window. We ran to the shattered window. Below us was the river. Black, churning water. It was a 30-foot drop. Jump, I screamed. But the butcher was recovering. He ripped the mask off his face, revealing a handsome older man with a scar running down his cheek. His eyes were red from the gas and the powder. He looked demonic. He lunged at me, grabbing my hair. You are not going anywhere, he snarled. I screamed as he yanked me back. I was losing consciousness. The ammonia was taking over. Suddenly, a hand reached out from the floor, a hand wrapped in bloody, shredded gauze. Leo. My brother slammed the butt of the spare pistol into the butcher's groin. It was a weak blow, but it was enough. The butcher flinched, loosening his grip. I spun around and shoved him. I put every ounce of my rage, every ounce of my pain into that shove. Get off my family. The butcher stumbled back. His heel caught on the edge of the broken window frame. He teetered. His eyes went wide. He fell. He disappeared into the white fog below, falling towards the burning hellscape of the factory floor. I did not wait to hear him hit. Damon, Leo, jump. We threw ourselves out of the window into the cold, wet darkness of the New York night. The impact with the water was like hitting a slab of concrete. One moment I was falling through the toxic white fog, and the next the world was black and shockingly cold. The freezing temperature of the East River knocked the air from my lungs, instantly replacing the burning sensation of the ammonia with a crushing pressure. I went deep. The current grabbed me, twisting me like a rag doll, pulling me down into the silt and the darkness. For a second I panicked. My limbs felt heavy. My dress was a lead weight wrapping around my legs, trying to drag me to the bottom. I kicked blindly, my shoes long gone, my toes scraping against submerged debris. I broke the surface, gasping for air, but instead of sweet oxygen, I inhaled a mixture of river spray and the lingering acrid taste of the chemical cloud drifting overhead. I coughed, a violent, racking spasm that tasted of salt and bile. The water was choppy, churning with the wake of passing barges and the turbulence of the storm. "Leo," I screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the wind and the crashing waves. I treaded water, spinning in a circle. The factory loomed above on the shoreline, a dark skeletal beast vomiting smoke into the night sky. The orange glow of the fire inside pulsed through the shattered windows, reflecting on the black water like the eyes of hell. "Here," a voice croaked to my left. I swam towards it, fighting the pull of the tide. Damon was keeping Leo afloat. My brother was dead weight, his head lolling back, his bandaged hands uselessly slapping the water. Damon was struggling. He was using only one arm to swim, the other pressed tight against his side where the glass had sliced him. His face was a mask of grim determination illuminated by the distant firelight. "Take him," Damon wheezed, shoving Leo towards me. "My arm. It is not working." I grabbed the back of Leo's shirt. "Kick, Leo, kick," I yelled into his ear. We formed a clumsy, desperate chain. I pulled Leo. Leo kicked feebly. Damon pushed from behind, using his legs to propel us all. We were three broken things drifting in a hostile sea. The cold was the new enemy. It was seeping into my bones, numbing my fingers, making my movements sluggish and clumsy. Hypothermia was setting in. If we stayed in this water for another 10 minutes, we would not drown. We would simply stop moving. The shore seemed miles away, though it was only 100 yards. The current was dragging us south, away from the factory, towards a rotting wooden pier jutting out from the darkness. "Aim for the pilings," Damon shouted, spitting out river water. We fought the river. Every stroke was a battle. My lungs burned with every breath, a reminder of the gas I had inhaled. My vision was blurry, stinging from the chemicals. But I kept kicking. I thought of Marcus back there in the gas. I thought of the butcher falling into the white void. They were dead. They had to be. And if I died here, their deaths would mean nothing. I reached out my hand, scraping against barnacles. Wood. Rotting, slime-covered wood. I grabbed the piling, holding on with a strength born of pure terror. I pulled myself up onto the lower beams of the pier. The wood groaned under my weight. I turned and grabbed Leo's collar, hauling him up. He scrambled onto the planks, coughing up water, shivering so violently his teeth chattered like castanets. "Damon," I reached down. Damon was drifting past, his strength failing. He reached up his hand, slipping on the slime. I lunged forward, grabbing his wrist with both hands. I pulled. He was heavy, a mountain of muscle and waterlogged gear. I screamed with the effort, my heels digging into the wood. 1, 2, 3. I fell back, dragging Damon onto the pier on top of me. We lay there in a heap of wet clothes and shivering limbs, gasping for air while the rain lashed down on us, washing the river muck from our skin. "We are alive," I whispered to the sky. "We are alive." We lay there for a long time, listening to the distant wail of sirens converging on the factory. The red and blue lights of police cruisers and fire trucks danced on the factory walls, painting the smoke in festive colors. They were too late. The play was over. The actors had left the stage. Damon sat up first, groaning as he clutched his side. He checked his tactical vest. Empty. He checked his ankle holster. Gone. Lost in the river. "We need to move." He said, his voice rough. The police will sweep the riverbanks. If they find us, they will arrest us. I finished sitting up. Arson, murder, theft. We are not victims anymore, Damon. We are fugitives. I crawled over to Leo. He was curled in a fetal position, his eyes wide and vacant. I touched his face. It was ice cold. Leo, look at me. He looked at me. His eyes were haunted. Marcus. Gone, I said firmly. He is gone, Leo. He can never hurt you again. Leo nodded slowly. Then he looked at his ruined hands. The bandages were soaked gray and falling apart. What do we do now, Elena? We have nothing. I stood up, swaying slightly as the blood rushed to my head. I looked down at my dress. It was torn, stained with wine, mud, and chemicals. I looked at the burning factory. That was my past burning. My inheritance. My name. The Vane legacy was up in smoke. We have our lives, I said. And we have $150 million scattered to the winds. We bought our freedom, Leo. But now, we have to keep it. I helped Leo stand. He leaned on me heavily. Damon limped beside us. We walked off the pier onto the muddy bank of the Bronx shoreline. We stuck to the shadows, avoiding the streetlights. We were ghosts now. Where do we go? Leo asked, his teeth still chattering. The hospital. No hospitals, Damon said, checking the street. Gunshot wounds and chemical burns trigger a mandatory police report. We need a ghost doctor. Do you know when? I asked. Damon nodded. There is a vet in Queens. He owes me a favor. He usually patches up fighting dogs, but he has done human work before. It is not the Ritz, but it is off the grid. We walked until we found a payphone outside a closed bodega. It was a relic from another era covered in graffiti. I checked my pockets. Nothing. My phone was gone. My wallet was gone. Damon reached into his boot and pulled out a small waterproof pouch. He opened it, revealing a few soggy $20 bills and a quarter. Emergency fund, he said with a weak grin, handing me the quarter. I took the coin. It felt cold and small. I looked at the two men standing in the rain. One was a mercenary who had bled for me. The other was a boy I had failed to protect. They were my family now. Not by blood, but by trauma. I dialed a number. Not the police. Not a lawyer. I called a taxi service. When the cab arrived, the driver took one look at us, three drowned rats standing in the rain, and locked his doors. I held up the wet cash, pressing it against the window. $100. Just to Queens. No questions. The driver hesitated, then unlocked the doors. We piled in. The heat in the car was overwhelming. It made my skin prickle. As we drove away, I looked back one last time at the factory. The fire was under control now, but the building was a ruin. Marcus Sterling's tomb. I leaned my head back against the seat and closed my eyes. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't fear. It wasn't sadness. It was lightness. I had lost everything. My money, my status, my husband, my home. But I had never felt more powerful. I reached out and took Leo's hand, avoiding the wounds, holding his wrist. I took Damon's hand with my other. We sat there in the dark, connected by our pulse beats. What happens tomorrow? Leo whispered. Tomorrow I open my eyes, watching the city lights blur past. Tomorrow we disappear. Leo, Elena Vane died in that river. Who are you, then? Damon asked, looking at me in the rearview mirror reflection. I smiled, a cold, hard smile. I am the woman who killed the butcher, and I think I am just getting started. The sun rose over New York City like a gray bruise, struggling to push through the thick layer of clouds that still hung low and oppressive. We were parked in a long-term storage facility in Brooklyn. Inside a metal unit Damon had rented under a fake name 3 years ago. It was a 10 by 20 foot box of concrete and steel. filled with dust motes and the ghosts of Damon's past life. The van engine ticked as it cooled, the only sound in the suffocating silence. I sat on a stack of plastic crates, wrapped in a blanket that smelled of mothballs. My dress, once a symbol of my status, was now a ruined rag stiff with dried river water and blood. I pulled it tighter around me, shivering not from cold, but from the reality crashing down on me. Leo was asleep on a camping cot Damon had set up. His breathing was shallow, his bandaged hands resting on his chest like a dead pharaoh. Damon was stripping down a weapon he had pulled from a hidden cache in the corner, a black assault rifle that looked terrifyingly efficient. "We have a problem," Damon said, not looking up from the gun oil and rags. "We have zero cash. The van is running on fumes, and your face is plastered on every screen in Times Square." I nodded, staring at the concrete floor. "I know. We need resources. Elena, real resources, not just a quarter for a phone call." Damon snapped the rifle back together with a sharp clack. "I have some contacts who buy intel, but that takes time. We don't have time. If Marcus is alive, he's making moves right now." "He's alive," I said, the certainty settling in my gut like a stone. A cockroach doesn't die that easily, and if he's alive, he's not just hiding, he's rewriting the story. I stood up and walked to the roll-up door, peering through the crack at the dreary morning light. "We need money. Liquid, untraceable money." "You donated the jackpot to the Red Cross," Damon reminded me, a hint of frustration in his voice. "Remember, I donated the cartel's money," I corrected him, "but I didn't touch my own." Damon looked at me, confused. "Your trust fund. The accounts are frozen. The police are watching them. You walk into a bank. You walk into handcuffs." "Not the trust fund," I said, turning back to him. "The insurance?" "What insurance?" "The diamonds," I said softly. Damon paused. "What diamonds?" "My mother's collection, the Vane heritage set." I walked over to where Leo lay and brushed a stray hair from his forehead. "When my father died, he didn't trust banks. He didn't trust the government. He converted 10% of his liquid assets into uncut diamonds. He hid them in the one place nobody would ever look." "Where?" Damon asked. "In the family crypt," I said. "Greenwood Cemetery." Damon stared at me for a long moment, then let out a low, incredulous laugh. "You're kidding. You hid a fortune in a graveyard." "It's poetic, isn't it?" I gave him a humorless smile. "Money and death always go together in my family. The diamonds are inside my mother's urn. It's a cremation niche, sealed. But I have the key." "Greenwood is crawling with security," Damon said, rubbing his bearded chin. "And if the police are looking for you, they might be watching the family plot. They're watching the house. They're watching the office. They aren't watching a grave." I argued. "It's a risk, Damon. But those stones are worth $20 million, enough to buy new identities, a plane, and a private island where Marcus can never find us." Damon looked at Leo, then at the rifle, then back at me. "20 million. That buys a lot of safety. It buys a war chest," I said. "We go tonight, when the gates close." "Tonight is a long way off?" Damon muttered. "We need food. We need clean clothes. You look like you walked out of a horror movie." He walked to a dusty duffel bag in the corner and pulled out a pair of cargo pants and a black hoodie. "Put these on. You're small, so you'll swim in them, but it beats the blood dress." I took the clothes. They were rough and utilitarian. I went behind a stack of boxes to change. As I peeled off the ruined white gown, I felt like I was shedding a skin. The silk was stained with wine, mud, and sweat. It was the dress of a victim. I kicked it into the corner and pulled on the black tactical gear. The hoodie was huge, swallowing my frame. but it felt like armor. I stepped out, rolling up the sleeves. How do I look? Like you're ready to rob a bank, Damon said approvingly. Or a grave. The day passed in an agonizingly slow crawl. We ate MRE's meals ready to eat from Damon's stash, tasteless brown paste that sat heavy in my stomach. We monitored the police scanner on a handheld radio. The chatter was constant. All units, be advised. Suspect Elena Vane considered armed and dangerous. Last seen in the vicinity of Hunts Point. Armed and dangerous. The words sounded surreal. Yesterday, I was a socialite planning a charity gala. Today, I was public enemy number 1. Damon spent the afternoon teaching me how to strip and clean a pistol. If you're going to carry it, you need to know how it works, he said, his voice stern. No more clicks when you pull the trigger. I learned the weight of the slide, the spring of the magazine, the smell of the oil. My hands, once used to holding champagne flutes, were now stained with gun grease. It felt right. As dusk fell, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple, we prepared to move. Leo was awake, groggy but lucid. You're leaving me here, he asked, his voice trembling slightly. It's safer, Leo, I said, checking the lock on the storage unit. Damon rigged the door. Nobody gets in without triggering an alarm. We'll be back in 2 hours. What if... Leo hesitated. What if Marcus finds me? He won't, I said fiercely. He's hunting me, not you. Stay quiet. Stay hidden. We left him in the dark box with a bottle of water and a loaded pistol he couldn't fire with his bandaged hands. But having it seemed to comfort him. We took the van. Damon drove aggressively, cutting through the back streets of Brooklyn to reach the cemetery. Greenwood was a sprawling city of the dead, rolling hills covered in elaborate mausoleums and stone angels. The gates were locked. Massive iron bars meant to keep the living out and the dead in. We go over the wall on the south side, Damon whispered, killing the lights a block away. There's a blind spot in the cameras. We scaled the stone wall. The ivy was slick with rain, but the adrenaline pushed me upward. I dropped onto the wet grass on the other side, the silence of the cemetery enveloping us instantly. It was a different kind of silence than the storage unit. This was peaceful, final. We moved through the shadows, dodging the beams of the security patrol car that lazily circled the perimeter. My mother's niche was in the main columbarium, a grand Gothic structure that looked like a cathedral. The door is locked, Damon noted as we approached the heavy bronze entrance. Not for family, I said. I reached under a loose stone in the flower bed near the entrance, a hiding spot I had used as a child to leave notes for my mother. My fingers brushed cold metal. A key. I unlocked the side door. Click. It swung open on silent hinges. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of stone and old flowers. Walls of marble plaques surrounded us, each marking a life extinguished. I walked to the third row. 7th column. Victoria Vane. Beloved mother. Here, I whispered. I used a small tool Damon had given me to unscrew the faceplate. It came loose with a soft grinding sound. Behind it sat a bronze urn. It was heavy. Is this it? Damon asked, watching the door. Yes. I twisted the lid. It was sealed tight. I strained, my grip slipping. Help me. Damon holstered his gun and gripped the lid. With a grunt of effort, he twisted. Crack. The seal broke. I reached inside, past the ash, my fingers searching. I felt a velvet pouch. I pulled it out. It was heavy, clicking with the sound of stones. I opened the drawstring and poured the contents into my palm. Even in the dim light of the moon filtering through the stained glass, they sparked. Uncut diamonds, large, rough, and priceless. Jackpot, Damon breathed. Suddenly, a bright light blinded us. A spotlight beam cut through the darkness, pinning us against the wall of the dead. "Drop it!" a voice roared from the shadows. "Hands where I can see them!" I froze, clutching the diamonds. It wasn't the police. The voice was too familiar, too smug. Out of the darkness stepped a figure holding a flashlight in one hand and a gun in the other. He was limping. His suit was scorched and torn, and half his face was wrapped in dirty bandages. But the one eye that was visible burned with a familiar, hateful madness. "Marcus, did you really think," Marcus rasped, stepping into the light, "that you were the only one who knew about Mommy's little secret?" The flashlight beam wavered in Marcus's hand, casting long dancing shadows against the marble walls of the mausoleum. It felt like the crypt itself was breathing, inhaling the tension and exhaling the smell of damp earth and burnt flesh. Marcus stood between us and the only exit, a specter raised from the dead. The left side of his face was a ruin of angry red skin and weeping blisters, hastily covered with dirty gauze that did little to hide the damage the ammonia gas had inflicted. He didn't look like a CEO anymore. He looked like something that had crawled out of a nightmare. "You look surprised." "Elena," Marcus rasped, his voice sounding like dry leaves being crushed. He stepped closer, the gun in his right hand steady despite his injuries. "Did you think I would just lie down and die in that factory? I am a survivor." I held my breath. "I crawled through the drainage pipe while you were playing hero on the roof." "How did you know?" I asked, my grip tightening on the velvet bag of diamonds. The stones ground against each other, a sound like grinding teeth. "Nobody knew about this place. Not even you." "Ah, I am your husband," Marcus sneered, a grotesque expression on his half-masked face. "I went through your things years ago. Your mother's diary. She was a sentimental fool, writing about the sparkling legacy she buried with her. I always wondered if it was real. And tonight, when I saw you heading for the cemetery on the traffic cams, I knew." He extended his hand, the palm scorched and raw. "Give it to me." "It's $20 million. Marcus," I said, stepping back until my heels hit the cold stone of the altar. "It's my life. It's Leo's future." "It is my severance package," Marcus screamed, the sound echoing painfully in the confined space. "You ruined me. You burned my reputation. You gave my money to charity. This is mine by right. I earned it with every second I spent tolerating you." Damon shifted his weight slightly, his hand inching toward his holster. Marcus swung the flashlight, blinding him. "Don't try it, hero," Marcus warned. "I will put a bullet in her belly before you can clear your holster, and then I will take the stones from her cold, dead hands." Outside, the wail of sirens grew louder. The police had seen the flashlight, or maybe the silent alarm on the gate had tripped. Blue and red lights began to flash through the stained glass windows, painting the saints on the walls in chaotic disco colors. "Time is up," Marcus hissed. "Throw the bag, now." I looked at the bag, then at Damon. He gave me a barely perceptible nod, a signal. "You want it?" I yelled. "Take it." I didn't toss the bag to him. I threw it at his face. The heavy sack of diamonds sailed through the air like a cannonball. Marcus's greed was his undoing. Instinctively. He didn't dodge. He tried to catch it. He dropped the flashlight to grab the fortune with both hands. The moment the light hit the floor, Damon moved. He lunged across the small space, tackling Marcus into a wall of commemorative plaques. Crunch. The impact was brutal. The gun in Marcus's hand went off. Boom! The sound in the stone chamber was deafening, louder than thunder. The bullet ricocheted off the marble ceiling, showering us with stone dust. My ears rang with a high-pitched whine. I scrambled away, diving behind a stone sarcophagus. In the flickering strobe of the police lights outside, I saw them wrestling on the floor, It was a vicious, animalistic struggle. Marcus was fighting with the strength of the insane, clawing at Damon's stapled wound. Damon grunted in pain, slamming an elbow into Marcus's burnt face. Marcus screamed, a sound of pure agony, but he didn't let go of the gun. He kicked Damon hard in the knee, sending the big man stumbling back. Marcus scrambled to his feet, panting heavily. He looked wildly around the floor. The velvet bag had split open. Diamonds, dozens of them. They lay scattered on the dirty stone floor, glittering like fallen stars in the chaotic light. Mine. Marcus whimpered. He fell to his knees, ignoring Damon, ignoring the gun. He started frantically scooping the diamonds up, stuffing them into his pockets, into his mouth, anywhere they would fit. Mine. All mine. Police dropped the weapon. A voice boomed from outside the crypt door. Heavy boots were running on the gravel path. Damon grabbed my arm, pulling me up. Leave it. We have to go. But the money. I stared at the fortune scattering on the floor. It's him or us. Elena, move. Damon dragged me towards the back of the mausoleum. There was a small ventilation window, high up near the ceiling. It was stained glass. Damon didn't hesitate. He picked up a heavy bronze vase and hurled it. Crash! The beautiful artwork shattered, raining colored glass onto the grass outside. Boost me, Damon ordered. I locked my hands together. He stepped into them, groaning as he pulled himself up and through the narrow opening. He reached down, his hand bloody but strong. Come on! I looked back one last time. Marcus was still on his knees, crawling amidst the dust and the diamonds, giggling as he gathered his prize. He didn't even look up as the bronze doors were kicked open by a SWAT team. Freeze down on the ground. I grabbed Damon's hand. He hauled me up. I scraped my ribs on the stone sill, tearing my hoodie, but I squeezed through. We dropped into the darkness of the bushes behind the mausoleum just as the interior was flooded with tactical lights. Secure the suspect, we have one male in custody, a police officer shouted from inside. We didn't stay to listen. We ran. We ran through the rows of graves, tripping over headstones, tearing through thorny hedges. The cemetery was alive with flashlights and shouting voices. Helicopters were overhead, their searchlights sweeping the grounds like the eyes of God. We reached the south wall. Damon vaulted over, landing heavily on the sidewalk. I followed, hitting the concrete hard enough to bruise my knees. We sprinted down the dark street, putting blocks between us and the cemetery. We didn't stop until my lungs were burning and my legs felt like jelly. We collapsed in an alleyway behind a dumpster. Gasping for air, it was over. I leaned my head back against the brick wall, closing my eyes. I felt my pockets. Empty. We lost it, I whispered. The reality crashing down on me. We lost everything. The trust fund. The diamonds. It's all gone. Damon slid down the wall next to me, checking his pistol. He had lost his rifle in the struggle. Marcus has the diamonds, and the cops have Marcus. So the police have the diamonds, I said bitterly. They'll seize it as evidence. It's gone. Damon, we have nothing. No money. No identities. Just a fugitive warrant. Damon was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his pocket. Not exactly nothing. He opened his hand. Sitting in his palm, reflecting the dim street lamp light, was a single, large, uncut diamond. It was the size of a walnut. I managed to grab one before I tackled him, Damon said, a rare, tired smile touching his lips. It's not 20 million, but on the black market, it's maybe 2. I stared at the stone. It was ugly, rough, and dirty. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. 2 million, I breathed. That's enough. It's enough to disappear. Damon agreed. It's enough to get Leo and vanish. I took the stone, holding it tight. I thought of Marcus, screaming mine as the police cuffed him. He had gotten what he wanted. He had the pile of diamonds, but he had lost his freedom. "Let's go get my brother," I said, pushing myself off the wall. "I'm done with New York." "Where are we going?" Damon asked, limping beside me. I looked at the diamond, then at the dark horizon. Somewhere where the extradition laws are just a suggestion. The neon lights of Chinatown reflected on the wet asphalt like spilled gasoline, painting the puddles in shades of electric blue and dragon red. We stood in the back alley of a noodle shop, the air thick with the smell of old fryer grease and ozone. Damon knocked on a rusted steel door. Thud, thud, pause, thud. It was a rhythmic code that belonged to a life I never knew existed. A slide hole opened, a pair of eyes, yellowed with age and suspicion, peered out. "We are closed," a voice rasped. "We have a rock," Damon said, his voice low. "Big enough to crack a skull. We need paper. Tonight." The eyes flicked to me, then to the bulge of the pistol under Damon's jacket. The slot slid shut. A moment later, the heavy bolts threw back with a grinding noise that set my teeth on edge. We stepped inside. The room was small, lit by a single flickering bulb. It was a pawnshop for the underworld. Mr. Chen sat behind a counter protected by bulletproof glass thick enough to stop a tank round. He didn't look like a criminal. He looked like a grandfather, but the shotgun resting on the counter said otherwise. "Show me," Chen commanded, extending a velvet tray through the slot. I reached into my pocket. My fingers brushed the rough surface of the uncut diamond. I pulled it out and placed it on the tray. It sat there, ugly and magnificent. A chunk of carbon that people killed for. Chen pulled the tray back. He screwed a jeweler's loop into his eye. He studied the stone for a long time. The silence in the room was suffocating. I could hear the ticking of a dozen stolen watches on the wall. "It is Vane heritage," Chen said, not looking up. "I saw this in the papers. Stolen from a grave. This stone is not just hot. Mr. Damon, it is radioactive." "Can you move it?" Damon asked, leaning against the glass. "I can cut it," Chen said, dropping the loop. "Recut it into 10 smaller stones. But that takes time and risk. The police are tearing the city apart for you." "We don't have time," I said, stepping forward. "We need cash. Fast sale price." Chen looked at me. He smiled, revealing gold-capped teeth. "Fast sale means half price. $1 million. Cash. Non-negotiable." "It's worth 2, Damon growled. "It is worth nothing if you are in handcuffs." Chen countered. He reached under the counter and pulled out a heavy canvas duffel bag. He threw it onto the counter. It landed with a solid, satisfying weight. 1 million. Small bills. Untraceable. I looked at the bag. $1 million. It was a fraction of my inheritance. It was less than the cost of my wedding. But right now, it was the difference between life and death. "Deal," I said. Chen pushed the bag through the slot. I grabbed it. It was heavy. The smell of the money-old paper and ink was the sweetest perfume I had ever encountered. "Go," Chen said, already picking up his cutting tools. "If the cops come, I never saw you." We left the shop and melted back into the rain. The storage unit in Brooklyn felt colder than before. We rolled up the door, the metal screeching like a dying animal. Leo was sitting exactly where we had left him, shivering on the cot, the gun held loosely in his bandaged lap. When he saw us, he didn't smile, he just exhaled. A long sound of relief. "I thought," Leo's voice cracked, "I thought you weren't coming back. We're leaving." "Leo," I said, kneeling beside him. I opened the duffel bag. The sight of the stacked cash made his eyes widen. "Can you walk?" "I can run if I have to," Leo said, struggling to his feet. He winced as he put weight on his legs, but he stood. We abandoned the van 3 blocks from the port. It was too conspicuous. We walked the rest of the way, 3 shadows moving through the industrial wasteland of the New Jersey docks. The wind coming off the water was freezing, carrying the smell of salt and diesel fuel. Damon led us to Pier 90, a massive cargo ship. The Iron Maiden sat in the berth. It was a rust bucket, a mountain of steel painted black and scarred by decades of ocean storms. Cranes were loading the last containers, the metallic crash of steel on steel echoing through the night. A man was waiting at the gangplank. He was huge, with a beard that looked like steel wool and a cigar clamped between his teeth. "Captain Volkov." "You are late," Volkov grumbled, checking his watch. "Tide waits for no man, not even for friends of Damon." "We had to make a withdrawal," Damon said, tossing the duffel bag to the captain. Volkov caught it with one hand. He unzipped it, checked the contents, and grinned. "Welcome aboard. Accommodation is rustic, but secure. No manifest, no passport control. We drop you in Panama in 6 days." "Panama," Leo whispered. "I've never been to Panama." "It's warm," I said, guiding him up the metal ramp. "And it has no extradition treaty." We climbed aboard. The ship was a labyrinth of containers and narrow walkways. Volkov led us to a crew cabin deep in the bowels of the ship. It was small, smelling of engine grease and cabbage, with 4 narrow bunks bolted to the walls. "Stay here," Volkov ordered. "Do not come on deck until we are in international waters. If the Coast Guard boards, you hide in the engine room vent." He slammed the heavy iron door shut, the lock engaged with a final, resonant clank. We were sealed in. I sat on the bottom bunk. The ship's engines rumbled to life beneath us, a deep vibration that shook the floor. We were moving. Damon sat opposite me, leaning his head back against the steel wall. He looked exhausted. His bandage was seeping blood again. "We did it," he whispered. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small, crumpled piece of paper. It was a newspaper clipping I had grabbed from a trash can outside the pawn shop. The headline screamed in bold black letters, "Billionaire CEO arrested in cemetery heist. Marcus Sterling charged with fraud, kidnapping, and desecration of graves." Below it was a picture of Marcus being shoved into a police car. He looked deranged, his face half-burned, screaming at the camera. "He's going to prison for a very long time," I said, handing the paper to Leo. Leo looked at the photo. "He looks small." "He is small," I said. "He was always small. We just stood too close to see it." The ship lurched as it hit the open water. The motion was sickening, but also liberating. We were leaving the jurisdiction of the United States. We were leaving the wreckage of the Vane dynasty. I lay back on the thin mattress. I closed my eyes. I didn't see the dark cabin. I saw the fire at the ice plant. I saw the diamonds scattering on the floor. I saw the woman I used to be, drowning in the East River. I was not Elena Vane anymore. She was a ghost. "Elena," Leo asked from the top bunk, "what do we do when we get to Panama?" I opened my eyes and looked at the rusted ceiling. "We survive, Leo," I said. "We heal. And then, we build something new." Damon chuckled softly in the dark. "With $1 million and a few bad attitudes, we can build an empire." The ship's horn blasted, a mournful, deep sound that signaled our departure. Boom! It vibrated through my chest. Goodbye, New York. Goodbye, Marcus. I rolled over, and for the first time in 3 days, I slept without dreaming of boxes. The heat in Panama City was a physical weight, a humid blanket that smelled of salt water, diesel fumes, and frying plantains. It was a stark contrast to the sterile, freezing cold of the Vane ice plant. But 6 months later, my skin had finally stopped shivering. I sat on the terrace of a colonial villa in Casco Viejo, overlooking the Pacific entrance to the canal. The sun was setting, bleeding streaks of violent orange and purple across the sky. I wore a white linen suit, sharp and tailored, a far cry from the blood-stained silk dress I had arrived in. My hair was cut short, a severe bob that framed a face which no longer smiled out of politeness. "He is late," Damon rumbled from the shadows. Damon stood by the railing, watching the street below. He wore a loose guayabera shirt that barely concealed the shoulder holster beneath. The scar on his neck from the glass in the factory was a jagged white line, a permanent reminder of the night we died and were reborn. "He is testing us," I said, picking up my glass of sparkling water. The ice clinked softly. "Mr. Morales thinks because we are new money, we are desperate. He mistakes patience for weakness." Below us, a black SUV pulled up to the curb. Heavy doors slammed. Thud. Thud. "Showtime," Damon said, stepping back into the alcove where he became invisible. 3 men walked up the stairs. The leader, Morales, was a thick-set man with a mustache that twitched when he was nervous. He was a local facilitator, a polite word for a man who moved things that did not want to be moved. "Ms. Vane," Morales said, sweating in his cheap suit. He didn't use my fake name. He used my real one. It was a power move, a threat. "Please, sit." I gestured to the empty chair. "And it is Ms. Sterling now. I decided to keep the name. It has a certain notoriety." Morales sat, but his 2 bodyguards remained standing, their hands hovering near their waistbands. "We have a problem with your shipment," Morales said, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief. "The customs official, he is asking for more. 50,000 more." I didn't blink. I looked at the ocean, watching a massive container ship glide silently towards the locks. "We had a deal, Morales. 20% flat fee." "Prices go up." Morales shrugged, a greasy smile appearing. "You are Americans. You have deep pockets. And I hear the Americans back home are still very interested in finding you. It would be a shame if someone tipped off the embassy." It was a blackmail attempt. Crude. Amateur. I sighed and placed my glass on the table. Clink. "Leo," I called out softly. The French doors opened. My brother stepped out. He looked older than 19. He wore dark glasses and a tablet computer was tucked under his arm. His hands were covered in thin black compression gloves, hiding the scars where the nails had been. He couldn't play the violin anymore. The tendons were too damaged, but he had found a new instrument. "Information." "Show him," I said. Leo tapped the screen of the tablet and slid it across the table to Morales. Morales looked at the screen. His smile vanished. His face turned the color of ash. "What is this?" he whispered. "That," Leo said, his voice calm and melodic, "is a live feed from the security camera inside your warehouse in Cologne. And the second window, that is your bank account in the Caymans. You seem to be missing everything." "I drained it 5 minutes ago," Leo explained casually, as if talking about the weather. "The money is currently sitting in a holding account. If Elena gives the word, it disappears forever. If she gives the other word, the police get the video of your warehouse." Morales looked up at me, terror in his eyes. You can't do this. I have men." "You have employees," I corrected him. "And employees only follow the man who can pay them. You can't pay them anymore. Morales, I can." I leaned forward. "Damon." Damon stepped out of the shadows. He didn't draw a gun. He just cracked his knuckles. Crack. The sound was loud in the humid air. The customs official didn't ask for more money, did he? I asked softly. You just got greedy. Morales trembled. Please, Ms. Sterling. It was a mistake. A mistake is forgetting your keys, I said, standing up. This was an insult. I walked over to him and placed a hand on his shoulder. He flinched. You work for me now, Morales, exclusively. The fee is 10%. And if you ever try to leverage my past against me again, I will not send Damon. I will send my brother. And he has a lot of anger to work through. Morales nodded frantically. Yes. Yes. Of course. 10%. Get out. Morales and his men scrambled down the stairs, tripping over each other in their haste to escape the terrifying woman in the white suit. I watched them go, feeling nothing. No triumph. No fear. Just the cold satisfaction of a calculation resolving correctly. He will fall in line, Damon said, joining me at the railing. For now. Fear is a better currency than loyalty, I murmured. Leo picked up the tablet, wiping the screen. By the way, I got an alert on the crawler program I set up for New York News. My heart skipped a beat. Just once. Marcus. Dead, Leo said. The word hung in the air, heavy and final. Prison riot. Leo read from the screen. Rikers Island. He was stabbed in the showers yesterday morning. Multiple assailants. No witnesses. I closed my eyes. I expected to feel relief. Instead, I felt a void. The man who had terrorized me, who had cut pieces off my family, was gone, shivved in a dirty shower by strangers. It was an ignoble end. A small end. Did you order it? Damon asked quietly. I opened my eyes and looked at him. No, I didn't have to. The butcher had friends inside. Marcus owed a debt. Debts are always paid. So it's over, Leo said, lowering the tablet. Really over. I looked out at the horizon, where the sea met the sky in a dark, bruised line. Was it ever over? We were safe here. Yes. We had money. We had power. We had rebuilt the Vane Empire from the ashes, trading in information and logistics instead of ice. But the darkness was still there. I could feel it in the itch of my trigger finger. I could hear it in the silence of the night. We hadn't just escaped the monsters. We had become them to survive. No, Leo, I said, turning back to my family, my scarred soldier and my broken musician. It's not over. The board just got bigger. I picked up my glass again, raising it to the dying sun. To the butcher, I whispered. To the butcher, Damon echoed. To us, Leo added. I took a sip. The water was cold, but the fire inside me was burning hotter than ever. I wasn't the prey anymore. I wasn't even the hunter. I was the environment. I was the storm. And if anyone else ever tried to send me a gift in a box, I would make sure they were inside it when I sent it back.